Chapter 1042. I'm becoming more and more reliant on magic. I don't know if this is good or bad. The weave is shrinking and the weave dragon is sleeping. I feel that things aren't that simple. The reform of mages has to be accelerated, and the profession of mages should be diluted as much as possible. When it came to preventing the revival of mages, Liszt shared the same mentality as all the nobles. They could rely on mages to create equipment, but they must never be allowed to affect the knight system. Perhaps in the knight's mind, the ancient Moon Empire was indeed the symbol of the pinnacle of civilization. Every little bit of success had to be attributed to the Moon Empire. But when it came to themselves, a second Moon Empire must not be allowed to appear. That was a taboo. The great could be worshipped in temples. But they must not exist in reality. If there were any signs, they would be attacked. The appearance of the alchemy spell formation was the second piece of advanced magic technology that the Fire Kingdom grasped after the teleportation spell formation. Liszt loved it but was wary of it. It was classified as a national secret, and he must not allow any leakage. Without the guidance of a magic shooter, the outside world could not replicate this technology. Brother, when Achi was thoroughly researching alchemy, she had new inspiration for the stronghold. I'll go back and think about this problem now. After throwing the alchemy research topic away, Achi busied herself with thinking about the stronghold. Sai, this is clearly my cultivation system, but in the end, it all depends on Achi's research. It's hard to imagine how many detours I would have had to take to develop to this height if I hadn't met Achi. Liszt sighed inwardly, but there was nothing he could do. Research was really not his forte. Without the blessing of the power of fate, he was actually just an ordinary person. If he was really talented and had amazing talent, he would have made a name for himself on Earth long ago. He would not have worked overtime like a dog and then suddenly died and transmigrated. So he was very self-aware. He could usually brag and pretend, but he had to recognize his own strengths and weaknesses at critical times. He played to his strengths and avoided his weaknesses. Achi was a research-type talent, responsible for solving technical problems. He was a battle-type talent, responsible for charging and breaking through enemy lines and achieving achievements. They complemented each other. In Fire Castle, the old butler Carter softly interrupted Liszt, who was sitting in front of the piano and thinking, "Master, Marquis de Maria requests a report. Tell him to wait in the study." "Yes, master." "Oh, by the way, Mr. Carter, tell Mrs. Morrison to stop her work on Bampo milk tea. After drinking so many milk teas with new tastes, I still prefer the original taste." "As you wish, master." Carter bowed slightly and left the piano room. Liszt's fingers stroked the piano, but he had no interest in playing. Speaking of which, he hadn't touched the piano for a long time. There were too many dragons and elves at home and he couldn't split himself. His piano-playing skills were very rusty, and he no longer had the elegance of a piano king. But the piano pieces he had composed were becoming more and more widespread. Not only did the noble young ladies of the Fire Kingdom fantasize about Liszt every time they played to Alice, City in the Sky, Swan of St. Saëns and other piano pieces. In the three big kingdoms in the northeast corner of the legendary continent, many noble ladies and young ladies also fantasized about different images of Liszt. Some noble ladies felt that Liszt was a romantic and passionate person. Otherwise, how could he compose such delicate and gentle pieces? Some noble ladies felt that Liszt was a powerful and strong man with amazing stamina. Only such an identity was worthy of the identity of the Dragon Knight who had founded the great foundation of the Fire Kingdom. Some young ladies felt that Liszt was a killing beast. He had even killed 2 of the Dragon Knight. How many ordinary knight had died in his hands? How could such a person not be a beast? But in the dead of night, the young ladies often fantasized about the charming scene of a beauty and a beast. In the hearts of most knight, Liszt represented a legend that was enough to be the idol of everyone in the era of the knight. Now, almost all the knight in the 3 big kingdoms used Liszt as the model for the protagonist. If the protagonist only rode a dragon, he would be scolded until he doubted his own life. In the past, it was cool for the protagonist to go out and meet elves. Now, the protagonist had to go out and meet a dragon to be cool. There were even smart writers who wrote many books such as Liszt, The Legendary Adventures of the Flame, Liszt, The Detailed Explanation of the Process of Riding the Flame Dragon, Liszt, The Unspeakable Story of the Flame Dragon, Liszt, The Flame and Acheroids, The Unspeakable Story of the Truth, and so on. These books were all successfully sold out and were printed one edition after another. Almost all of those young knight would carry a book about Liszt with them to constantly motivate themselves to become the next Liszt, the Flame. Liszt's glory had transcended the borders. The young knight of the Eagle Kingdom also worshipped him. This was indeed very touching. So when he met D. Maria Rainflowerstone in the study, he could see that on the bookshelf behind him, there was a pile of night novels with the words, "List Flame," written on them. When he was bored he would read them. He felt that it was quite interesting, especially some nude novels. "Your Majesty, this year's expansion order has been prepared. The Sapphire Duchy's orders of chivalry have been assembled. The Sapphire Duchy will be led by the Marquis of Golden Island, Roderick Golden Wheat. The Sapphire Duke will personally lead the Sapphire Dragon. What about at home? It has been decided that I will be the Commander-in-Chief. Count Geoffrey Hibiscus and Count Paris will be the Deputy Commander-in-Chief. 10,000 Earth Knights have been assembled. Among them are 1 Perfection Sky Knight, 8 Sacred Swordsman Sky Knights and 21 Ordinary Sky Knights. Have you decided on the specific time of the expedition and the location of the attack? The time of the expedition is set for October 3rd. There are 2 choices for the location of the expedition. One is the Sardinia Bay on the northern coastline of the Eagle Kingdom, and the other is the lush promenade on the southern coastline. The final decision will be made when the time comes to assemble and set off from the Ironhoof Island, Oxhoof City. This was to prevent the news from leaking and to let the Eagle Kingdom take precautions in advance. Every time the Sapphire Duchy issued an expansion order, the specific location of the attack would be decided after going out to sea. List nodded. Proceed according to your decision. I will secretly protect the orders of chivalry with Marquis Emily from the Dragon Knight's attack. Then I will go and preside over the expansion order. Go. While the Fire Kingdom was assembling the orders of chivalry, the autumn wind rolled up the fallen leaves on the vast coastline of the Eagle Kingdom. All the aristocrats, big and small, began to get nervous. It's the season of the Sapphire Fly's expansion order again. An aristocrat at the banquet suddenly sighed, "I wonder which egg the Sapphire Fly will bite this year. With the appetite of the Sapphire Fly last year, if it really comes here, I'm afraid that everyone present here will suffer." "What are you afraid of? If the Sapphire Fly comes, we will leave the castle and hide in the countryside. If the castle wants to plunder, then plunder. Anyway, I don't rely on farming to make a living." "Humph, who doesn't know that the Wild Dog Mercenary Group is your property? Last time, they plundered a small town in my territory and didn't follow the rules to capture serfs. I didn't even bother with you for that. What evidence do you have that the Wild Dog Mercenary Group plundered?" "I naturally have a rat planted in the Wild Dog Mercenary Group." "Then you should properly interrogate this rat to see if he is competent or not." "Okay, stop quarreling. Let's think about how to pass this year's expansion order. Unlike in previous years, the legendary Dragon Knight is the master behind the expansion order." At the mention of the legendary Dragon Knight, several aristocrats present suddenly quieted down. After a good while of silence, a drunken aristocrat broke the silence. "If this year's expansion order comes to us, then we might as well not resist and join the Fire Kingdom together. Don't those smugglers advertise the welfare of the Fire Kingdom every day? Maybe we can also fight for glory." Chapter 1043. War was cruel, but this year's development made the war seem a little too smooth. When the knights attacked the dense corridor, most of the lords of the Eagle Kingdom who were attacked either closed the gates of their castles in advance and hid in the countryside, or directly opened the city gates to welcome the arrival of the king's army and became a part of the invaders. Some lords had even packed all the resources in their castles and were waiting for the arrival of the orders of chivalry. Then they would board large ships and set off for the Fire Kingdom. Some lords could not bear to abandon too many resources, and even arranged for the serfs to follow the knight team. There were not many scenes of battle that required a charge. Liszt was hiding at the material border. Seeing this scene, he could not help but sigh. It seems that the Eagle Kingdom has basically given up on the hinterland along the coast, and these lords have also given up. Since the Eagle Kingdom is so generous, I will let the knight work harder and plunder through the lush corridor, and then go to the Gulf of Aden. Adonis Moonlight Silver and his knight could not protect this land and his people. As a result, mercenary groups ran amok, serfs were sold wantonly, and civilians lived precarious lives. Liszt replaced him and moved all the civilians here to Flame Island. Let them start a new life on the Blazing Island, no longer having to worry about the mercenaries' invasion, and no longer having to worry about the insecurity of life. As a lord, Liszt might not have outstanding ideas such as equality for all, but he always adhered to one principle. That was to protect his people, to eat well, to wear warm clothes, and not to be killed at will. Even if they were his followers' subjects, he would interfere to ensure the basic safety of these people. This was his bottom line and the kindness in his heart. "Emily, what do you think of this development order?" He found the light green gemstone dragon knight, Emily, who was resting at the top of a mountain. List had barred descend in front of her and asked, "Your Majesty." Emily bowed and then replied, "There is almost no resistance. This is the glory of your Majesty. All the feudal lords in the lush corridor can be plundered and taken away. For the development of the Fire Kingdom, there is no need to be gentle like the Grand Duchy of Sapphire. If we plunder too much, this fertile land will no longer be cultivated by the nobles. The Eagle Kingdom has 4 prosperous coastlines: Sardine Bay, Yellow Mud Coast, Roaring Estuary, and Lush Corridor. Once a year we can plunder for 4 years. After 4 years the Fire Kingdom will be strong enough, and the land will have been cultivated. We can be completely self-sufficient. You're right, but I'm planning to plunder Lush Promenade and Sardinia Bay this year. I'm going to plunder both of them." List always complained that the construction was too slow. Plundering 2 territories a year can last for 2 years. In addition to the other territories along the coastline, it won't be a problem to maintain 3 development orders. Even if we can't plunder the coast of the Eagle Kingdom, Sir Achilles can also plunder the hinterland of the Eagle Kingdom with the teleportation magic circle. List had never thought of opening a teleportation circle directly to the hinterland of the Eagle Kingdom. The construction cost of the teleportation circle is too high. I heard that His Excellency Achilles is currently improving the teleportation circle. With His Excellency Achilles' great knowledge and magic, 3 years should be enough for him to build a regular teleportation circle. He can even design a magic door that can be temporarily opened. Emily was very respectful towards Achi. Emily was very respectful of Achi and thought that Achi was almost omnipotent. Maybe. List put his hands behind his back and looked at the migrating knight team in the distance. His voice was calm and powerful. "I don't like war, even though I am always the winner of war." Emily's eyes lit up as she watched his back. Invisible Dragon Bard took out a handful of smoke grass and chewed it slowly. Light Emerald Dragon Ethan twisted his head in disdain. "Mom, where are we going?" On the simple wooden carriage, the little boy, who was only a few years old, huddled tightly in his mother's arms and asked in a low voice. His mother squeezed at the edge of the carriage and tightly grasped the handrail to protect herself and her son. "We are going somewhere far away. Sir Lord will take us to a better place to live." The little boy did not understand what a better place was, but he did not continue to ask. Instead, he looked out of the carriage through a small gap under his mother's armpit. This was a carriage team that stretched for more than 10 kilometers. Walking on the dirt road, a squad of knight could be seen patrolling around the carriage team to prevent it from being attacked by mercenary corps on the way. Along the way, they had already encountered several mercenary corps that tried in vain to plunder the carriages and seize serfs. Especially when the team stopped to make a fire to cook, they could always see the squad of knight nervously searching every part of the forest in search of mercenary corps that might be lying in ambush. The little boy peeked at the knight on the tall horse. When the knight's eyes swept over the carriage, he immediately buried his head in his mother's arms. After waiting for a while, he stealthily raised his head and peeked again at the distant knight through the gap. The silver-white armor and the gleaming knight's lance were deeply engraved in his young mind. As well as leaving a superficial impression, knight, to protect himself and his mother. After a month-long trek, the team finally arrived at the sea. The little boy and his mother saw a large number of ships anchored in the harbor. They had never seen such large ships before. Each one of them was like a castle suspended in the sea. A black flag fluttered high on the mast of the large ships. The flag was embroidered with burning flames. The flames formed a huge fire dragon pattern, Fire Dragon Merchant Ship. This was the Fire Kingdom's new 3-masted cargo ship. It used a combination of horizontal and longitudinal sails for braking. Its characteristic could only be described in one word: big. In order to transport these knight and serfs, List no longer cared about concealment. He directly drove all the large ships that the Fire Kingdom had madly built over the past few years. Except for the Fire Dragon Merchant Ship. There was also a slender ship with a black flag hanging on the mast. However, the flag was no longer embroidered with burning flames. Instead, it was embroidered with white metal fragments. The fragments formed a huge Iron Dragon pattern, Iron Dragon Warship. A 3-masted ship that stood side by side with the Fire Dragon Merchant Ship. It was mainly used to transport the knight on expeditions. It was very mobile. By the sea. The serfs lined up under the knight's organization and boarded the Fire Dragon Merchant Ship one after another. On board, the sailors distributed a small pill, seasickness medicine, to the serfs. This was a new drug developed by the Guild of Magic. Not only was there a seasickness medicine, but there were also some other drugs. In terms of drug research, List was very generous. These drugs were basically not needed by the knight class, but the commoners were very dependent on them. Another lord would never invest in drugs to treat serfs. Only List insisted. "Mother, where are we going?" The little boy asked his mother in a low voice. Coming to the seaside and boarding the ship, everything made him curious and afraid. Without waiting for his mother to answer, a young man who looked like a mage and also like a noble came over. The young man smiled and said in wind language, "Little guy, the place we are going to is called the Fire Kingdom. From today onwards, you and your mother will become the subjects of the great List King of the Fire Kingdom. There will be no war, no harm. As long as you work hard, you will be able to eat your fill." After saying that, the young man then turned to the surrounding serfs and said loudly, "I'm Donnie Truth, the medical arcanist on board. If you feel uncomfortable, I'll help you heal and ensure that everyone can arrive at the Fire Kingdom in good health." Chapter 1044. The current sailing technology was different from when List first came to this world. With the development of shipbuilding technology after he made his fortune, under the guidance of the creative wizard Inuit Truth, the hybrid sailboat had successfully replaced the square-sail sailboat. Therefore, it only took 5 days to reach the island of Souls, which used to take 7 to 8 days to reach the island. There was a specially developed medicine for seasickness, and there were medical arcanists on board. Almost none of the migrating serfs lost their lives during the voyage. It was a novel experience of sailing on the sea. From afar they could see the towering Soul Fortress on the island of Souls. It was a towering white castle with a flaming flag fluttering in the wind. The castle did not have many special features. Because the island of Souls was very small, the castle appeared more slender, like a wizard tower. Of course, it also had the function of a tower. This Soul Fortress was also the only lighthouse on the island of Souls. The crystal lamp on the top of the tower was brightly lit day and night. It guided the direction of all the ships. "Everyone line up. Women and children disembark first. Follow the knight leading the team. Don't get separated. The island of Souls has strict security. Anyone who dares to stray will be shot by the patrols." The knight on the ship shouted, directing the thousands of people to disembark in an orderly manner. "You're hanging on to my baggage." I dropped my shoe. "Don't push me." "What a lively place. Is this where we're going to live?" "It's a magic gate." "That's a magic gate. I heard the captain say that it's the Island of Souls magic gate." "I heard that too. Passing through the magic gate is the Kingdom of Flames. A great kingdom without hunger or mercenaries." The little boy held his mother's hand tightly and squeezed in the line. His ears were filled with the chatter of the serfs and the loud scolding of the knight. After walking through the long line, he arrived in front of the magic gate of the Island of Souls. A dark blue vortex slowly rotated on his back. It was like a giant beast that was choosing its prey. Many people could be seen lining up to enter the mouth of the giant beast and then disappear. "I don't want to go in, I don't want to go in." One could even hear a serf who was too afraid to enter the magic gate, but was still dragged and thrown into the magic gate by the knight. List hoped that the knight would treat the serfs well. However, it was impossible for the knight to be gentle towards the serfs. It was normal for them to be rude. "Mom, I'm scared." The little boy shook his mother's hand. "Don't be afraid, that's a magic door." "What's a magic door?" "It's a magic door, a magical magic. Hold Mummy's hand and don't let go. We'll be able to reach our new home after walking through it." His mother also didn't know what a magic gate was. Although a knight had explained it to them on the ship, the serf's limited understanding was unable to understand what it meant to travel through space. Of course, it was not necessary to know the specific principles. It was enough to know that this was magic. Ordinary people were always full of reverence for magic and thought that it was omnipotent. When the team arrived at the magic gate, they heard a knight reading out the things to take note of, including the instructions for traveling through the magic gate, the Fire Kingdom's prohibitions, and so on. However, in the face of the mysterious and terrifying magic gate, few serfs listened carefully. They were either eager to try or on tenterhooks. They took the initiative or were pushed into the behemoth-like blue vortex. Boom. "Jim, close your eyes and hold Mummy's hand tightly." The little boy Jim closed his eyes, grabbed his mother's hand with both hands, and was pushed into the magic gate by the crowd. The next moment, a wonderful feeling of weightlessness hit him, and he was so scared that he almost cried. Fortunately, his mother's hand was always there, making him feel safer little by little. At this time he couldn't help but think of the wizard named Donnie Truth, who always boasted about how magical and great the magic gate was. He said that it was jointly built by His Majesty the Great King List Tulip and the great magic scholar A. Royd's Truth. It was the most magical embodiment of magic in the secular world, a symbol of the truth being conquered by humans. Of course, the little boy Jim didn't understand the above boasting. He just remembered that the magic gate was great and wanted to take a peek. So he cautiously opened his eyes and saw darkness, with occasional lightning-like flashes of light around him. Before he could see clearly, his body tilted, and he had already walked out of the magic transmission array. He fell to the ground and rolled around with his mother and other serfs. When he was helped up by his mother, his eyes suddenly opened up. He saw a city with densely packed buildings with no end in sight. There were tall castles around the city, and beautiful roads connected to each other. There was also a wizard tower towering into the clouds, as if it was a bridge between heaven and earth. There were also huge birds flying in the sky, and a knight could be vaguely seen on the back of the bird. Don't be in a daze, hurry up, follow the team forward, don't block the magic gate. Hurry up and follow, come here. Keep up, don't pick up your shoes again if you lose them, someone will give you new daily necessities later. Gather, calm down, gather. Stand tight, don't block the roadside, gather in this open space. Before the serfs could sigh with emotion at the prosperous world they saw, they were shouted at by the trainee knight on horseback to gather in the open space beside the road. Almost all of them gathered in a small group of 300 to 500 people. They were strictly restricted from walking and talking in private, so they could only wait anxiously. A moment later, a middle-aged man dressed as an official rushed over on horseback with his assistants. With an impatient smile on his face, he said in broken wind language, "Hello, people from afar, I am a receptionist of the Reed City Surf Reception Committee. My name is White ***, you can call me Sir White ***. In the next few days I will arrange for your clothing, food, housing, and transportation." Sir White *** paused and continued, "Now I will read to you a letter from the Master of the Sea, the Lord of all the Islands, the Great Holy Dragon, Invisible Dragon Knight, Fire Dragon Knight, Copper Dragon Knight, Grey Iron Dragon Knight, Bone Dragon Knight, Aluminum Dragon Knight, and King of the Fire Kingdom List Flame." The king is writing to us? Wow, there are so many Dragon Knight. There is only one Dragon Knight, and His Majesty is riding many dragons. Really, a letter from the king? How great! When the serfs heard the long list of titles, they were so surprised that they could not close their mouths. "Be quiet, all of you." Sir White ***'s assistant immediately lashed the whip in his hand on the ground, making a crisp snapping sound. The crowd quickly fell silent. Only then did Sir White *** pretend to take out a letter and read it word by word. "To my people who have come from afar, you are very unfortunate. You have lost your land, your homes, and even your loved ones. However, you are also very fortunate. In the Fire Kingdom you will be able to start a new life. In the name of the king, I promise you that everyone will be able to work, have enough to eat, get married, and have children. You will not be disturbed by war. Your children will be able to train their combat aura and learn knowledge. They will be blessed by the glory of knights and be protected by the king." Chapter 1045. In China there was a type of city called the Ghost City. There were many tall buildings and mountains, but they were empty and uninhabited. Hence, many foreign reporters reported that China's economy was collapsing and that it would be over soon. However, once the shops moved in and the facilities opened, the place would soon be filled with Chinese and become a new prosperous area. List admired this model. He wanted to build many such ghost cities in his territory. Empty houses, empty streets, empty roads, and even the fields outside the cities were empty. There were no crops. Basically, there were ghost cities on the main roads, flat farmland, and other areas. Not only did it include ghost cities at the level of a small town, but it also included ghost cities at the level of a small city. List even planned to build a few ghost cities at the level of a major city in the important areas of Flame Island. He was not afraid of the empty cities at all. As long as he continued to wage war and plunder, the people he plundered would automatically fill up the ghost cities and quickly start operations. The new batches of serfs that had arrived in Reed City were being sent to the various ghost cities. Many of the nobles who had voluntarily surrendered had their serfs absorbed by List as well. These serfs would gradually regain their freedom in the future and fill the ranks of the free citizens. It would be the breeding ground for the future knight class. In fact, as the Fire Kingdom continued to develop technology, combining magic with farming and industry, the serf system could no longer keep up with the times. The power brought by the fire dragon super magic directly pushed the traditional handicrafts to the stage of factories. The birth of a large number of factories such as brick factories, glass factories, paper factories, cement factories, textile factories, and so on freed countless serfs from the farmlands and turned them into professional workers. Of course, there was still a long way to go to transition from serfdom to an industrial society. However, with the rapid development of the Guild of Magic and the continuous advancement of magic technology, the Fire Kingdom would one day fully realize a new civilization. Liszt was not opposed to such progress. The reason was simple. If such a change similar to the Industrial Revolution happened on Earth, society would be in turmoil and the rulers would likely become prisoners. However, in this world, power was ultimately the most important. Controlling the dragon was the foundation of ruling. The status of a dragon-rearing family would not change with the changes in society. As long as they had the dragon in their hands, they would be the most noble nobles in the world at all times. All he needed to do was to guard against the return of the magicians. After experiencing the power of magic, not only did his vigilance not weaken, it became even stronger. Only magic could compete with dragons. Anyway, the serfs who had migrated to Flames Island listened to the letter read by the receptionist. The credibility of the king in this era was still very strong. Even if it was just an open letter, it was still enough to make all the uneasy serfs calm down and follow the officials to live in the ghost city. The little boy Jim and his mother had also settled down in a small city under the jurisdiction of Infernal Fire City. The mother's job hadn't been settled yet, but the little boy had already been sent to school. Together with many other Moon Killer and Flame Men children of the same age, he received night lessons. The first lesson in school was called Loyalty Class. The three teachers used Serpentine, Wind Language and Moon Language respectively to talk about the origin of the Fire Kingdom, the Great King and the ruler of everyone. Liszt Flame. Young Jim had heard this name countless times in just over a month, and it was deeply engraved in his mind. He also made some reflexive associations. Liszt Flame was great, was glory, was the Dragon Knight, was the king, was the ruler, was the most honorable person in the world. This belief was like a seed, buried in the heart of every child, germinating and growing with them. At the same time, the master of all the brainwashing methods, Liszt, had already driven the invisible dragon Bard to the Gulf of Aden, continuing to secretly protect orders of chivalry's ransacking of the coastline. Once again, a large number of nobles and lords were defeated. Then the captives were captured and those who surrendered. From top to bottom, everything that could be taken away was plundered. Because they didn't know that orders of chivalry, under the banner of expansion, would turn around and attack the Gulf of Aden from the dense corridor. Many noble lords didn't have time to hide, and were wiped out by orders of chivalry. The battle results are very rich. Another large number of knight and civilians came in, and the population of the Fire Kingdom has skyrocketed. He was very satisfied with such a harvest. However, there was also a hint of regret in his satisfaction. It's a pity that the Eagle royal family has adopted a cowardly attitude and ignored the development of the war here. Otherwise, I would really want to have another dragon-slaying war. Today I'm stronger than I was before and my dragons are stronger too. I also want to participate in a dragon-slaying war and fight side by side with your majesty, Emily responded. There will be a chance. The Eagle Kingdom may be waiting for an opportunity. According to my investigation, the Eagle royal family has sent messengers to the Steel Ridge and the Blast Furnace Castle several times, trying to form an alliance with the three to fight against me. Although the Steel Ridge and the Blast Furnace Castle have no intention of forming an alliance at present, there will be sooner or later. Liszt's infiltration of the three kingdoms had never stopped. His blood servants had already developed and grown. Mary Dawn and Daybreak, with his permission, had transformed a large number of new vampires. He even let Crazy control the Guild of Magic to add fuel to the fire, providing professional guidance for the vampires' training and evolving them into scouts. The new vampires' combat power was negligible, but the Bat Incarnation spell had been greatly improved. It was easier to hide its breath and even the Sky Knight couldn't sense it. With the help of these new vampires, most of the news in the three kingdoms could be investigated. Moreover, the long-distance communication of the magic platform also allowed the vampires to send information back to the kingdom at any time. The efficiency was so high that the three kingdoms couldn't imagine it. Who asked the Fire Kingdom to enter the Information Age in advance? In terms of intelligence investigation, the Fire Kingdom was already far ahead. In addition, the Guild of Magic was also studying the 4 shadow incarnations, including Heathley Shadow, in preparation to crack this training system. Once successful, it would be another rich method of investigation. Unfortunately, the King of Shadows, Louis Shadow, would rather die than submit. He didn't reveal any information about the Shadow incarnation, which increased the difficulty of cracking it. Now is the best time to form an alliance to strangle the newborn Fire Kingdom. They won't have a chance in the future, Emily said after thinking. Why do you say so? Because with the speed of His Majesty's dragon riding, the number of dragons will soon exceed the 8 dragons of the Eagle Kingdom. Including the vassal countries, they only have 12 dragons. List smiled slightly. Actually, the number of dragons I have has already caught up with the Eagle Kingdom because I also have a small water dragon that I keep in the sea. The fire dragon Leo, the light emerald dragon Isin, the invisible dragon Bard, the gray iron dragon Orn, the mountain copper dragon Marta, the bone dragon Winnie, the aluminum dragon Connor, and the water dragon Walter. There were exactly 8 dragons, the same number of dragons as the Eagle royal family. Emily opened her mouth in a well-timed surprise. Did His Majesty get another new dragon? How great! Chapter 1046. Emily's praise was sincere. In fact, even List himself felt that it was great. He was already riding 8 dragons, and there was also a Chi, the magic shooter, riding a unicorn, and Laird Truth, the new magic shooter who had joined them. It was equivalent to gathering 10 people who stood at the pinnacle of strength. From the perspective of the dragon-slaying war, it was already enough to overthrow the rule of the Eagle Kingdom in one battle. However, from the basic level, the Knight class of the Fire Kingdom was still too small. It was unable to replace the Eagle Kingdom in ruling such a large territory. Moreover, the Eagle Kingdom would not want to accept the dragon-slaying war. Adonis Moonlight Silver's strategy was very simple, which was to avoid battle, accumulate strength, and then frantically call for reinforcements to stop List's expansion. He had already revealed the news of the Divine Dragon to the Noble Frost Empire. Obviously, the Unsetting Light Empire and the Blue Dragon Empire had already received the news. However, the distance between the two empires was too far. It would not be easy for them to come over and snatch the invisible dragon. Or perhaps they were plotting something in secret. This was also the thing that List was most wary of. He did not dare to rashly launch the dragon-slaying war, fearing that the two empires would take advantage of the dragon-slaying war to secretly harm him. It was hard to say whether the Phoenix Incarnation's trump card had been exposed. Who knew what kind of unimaginable methods the empire, which had been passed down for thousands of years, had. Moreover, even if we defeat the Eagle Kingdom in the Battle of Dragon Slaying, we won't be able to snatch so many dragons. The soul brand is a huge problem. He sighed in his heart. The soul imprint had a huge enhancement effect on the dragon's soul world. Not only did he have to face a dragon, but he also had to face a perfect dragon knight. He had to use the bewildering dragon's soul fruit to lock the dragon's body. Only then would he be able to use it again and finally erase the soul imprint. He only had 2 soul fruits of the mysterious dragon, and it was not cost-effective to use them on the dragons of the Eagle Kingdom. Even with the hind legs of the Emerald Dragon, it would definitely cost a huge price to cultivate the soul fruit tree and produce new soul fruits of the mysterious dragon. He might even have to use the corpses of the dragons as nutrients to cultivate the fruit tree. The heart fruit tree on the Heart Island had been nourished by the Emerald Dragon Ethan to bear fruit. In other words, one dragon could be used as nutrients to produce 2 to 3 enigmatic dragon soul fruits. It sounded very profitable, but it was too difficult to execute something like killing a dragon and obtaining its fruit perfectly. After all, the resources needed to nurture an adult dragon were definitely astronomical. The Noble Frost Empire had the remains of the Emerald Dragon, which could be used to cultivate the mystifying dragon soul fruit. However, the dragons of the Noble Frost Empire did not grow crazily, which showed the complexity of the restrictions. However, I don't know if I can try to unite with the Iron and Steel Ridge Kingdom, or even the Blast Furnace Kingdom, to divide up the Eagle Kingdom? The Fire Kingdom is destined to rise. I have the invisible dragon. Even the Noble Frost Empire can't assassinate me. The Iron and Steel Ridge and the Blast Furnace Fort have no means to destroy me. Since the Fire Kingdom could not be destroyed, Steel Ridge and Furnace Castle's only choice was to passively resist or actively cooperate. Passive resistance was no different from slowly waiting for death. With the political means of the two royal families, they should be able to recognize this. Therefore, active cooperation was a more suitable choice. They could divide up the Eagle Kingdom and then grow together. After their strength increased, they would have more confidence to deal with the rise of the Fire Kingdom. In fact, no matter what choice I make, I feel that I can't stop my rise. With the growth of my strength, I will soon become a behemoth. but I can try to make the Iron and Steel Ridge and the Blast Furnace Fort believe that I only covet the mainland land of the Eagle Kingdom. After annexing a part of the Eagle Kingdom, I will be satisfied and stand on equal footing with them. He was too lazy to think about this kind of head-hurting diplomatic strategy. He might as well leave it to the Development Committee to worry about after he went back. In the autumn of 156 of the Sapphire Calendar, the war for expansion began in October. The two rich coastlines of the Lush Corridor and the Gulf of Aden were plundered successively, and ended at the end of December. The knight who broke through the enemy lines returned to their territories, embraced their wives and children, and also brought back countless spoils of war. This time, there were tens of thousands of Earth Knight, hundreds of thousands of Trainee Knight, and hundreds of thousands of serfs who were forced to migrate to the Fire Kingdom. There were also a large number of aristocratic lords among them. However, the majority of these aristocratic lords had directly surrendered and were not treated as captives. List was too embarrassed to forcibly take away their wealth. There were very few captives who were truly captured, and even fewer captives who were willing to pay ransom in exchange for freedom, because there was no point in going back. The entire Lush Corridor and the Gulf of Aden were already empty. The population, resources, sprites and so on were all packed up and taken away. The Fire Dragon freighter and Iron Dragon warship were like public buses, going back and forth to the Spirit Island and the coastline. When the Eagle royal family received the information sent back by the rats, List did not know what Adonis was thinking, but he was definitely very happy. As the last fleet left the coastline of the continent, he also immediately left and returned to Flame Island, where he silently counted the harvest of this time's war for expansion. Compared to last year's hasty development order, this year's preparations were more adequate and the scale was also larger. As a result, the population and resource harvest were more than 4 times that of last year. Unfortunately, there were too many greater aristocrats who had surrendered, and List did not get many sprites to replenish himself. With only a few lesser sprites and a batch of sprite worms, the harvest was not as great as that of the sprites born on Flame Island. Father, the knight who joined this time's development order must be carefully arranged and strictly supervised. Many of them used to secretly run mercenary groups, doing shady business. I do not want them to come to the Fire Kingdom and bring this kind of atmosphere with them. Rest assured, I will carefully manage these knight. Any aristocrat who violates the law, no matter how high their rank is, must be dealt with severely. Punishing them without warning is somewhat not benevolent enough. Father, it would be better for you to draft the Fire Kingdom's Knight Management Code, in my name, stipulating which behaviors are to be encouraged and which behaviors must be prohibited. Recently, the Development Committee has been compiling the laws of the future Fire Kingdom. The main body has already been completed, and we can just casually extract some regulations from it to compile the Fire Kingdom's Knight Management Code. Lee William explained. His biggest task as the Development Committee member was to prepare for the establishment of a country, especially a kingdom. Once established, all aspects of laws and regulations, social system, production and construction, diplomatic strategy, internal framework, and the enfeoffment of knight had to be perfected as soon as possible. Otherwise the country would sooner or later fall into chaos. In fact, if not for List's formidable deterrence, the Fire Kingdom would have long since descended into chaos. The composition of the population was too unbalanced. Currently, the Moon Killer was the largest group of people, but most of them belonged to the lowest class. At first, they might be happy because they could leave the forest and live a full life, but over time they would see that other people were living better lives, and it was inevitable that their mentality would explode. Fortunately, the ancient wizards among the Moon Killer had been properly settled, and the resentment of the serfs at the bottom was not a big problem. The second largest group of people were the Eagle Men who had migrated in batches. Some were captives who had surrendered, while others were serfs who had been sold. Language, culture, and customs made it inevitable for the Eagle Men to group together for warmth. This was a very big barrier. Even if the Eagle Men were forcibly dispersed and placed in different cities, they would still form cliques. Then there were the senators known as the Flame Men who were the most loyal to List, but their numbers were too small. In short, the Fire Kingdom was like a plate of loose sand that had been forcibly squeezed together by List. With his powerful strength, he used the strict hierarchy of nobles, commoners, and serfs under the knight system to maintain it. It would take a long time to completely stabilize it before everyone could be converted into Fire Kingdom subjects. List was not worried about this. As long as he existed, the Fire Kingdom would not fall into chaos. He now had a new expectation. It's almost New Year's Day. The Red and White Rose family's emissary group should be arriving soon. I wonder what gifts my old friend has sent this year. Chapter 1047. The gifts from the Rose and White Rose family were still the same: platinum potions and red dragon water. It seemed that other gifts did not show the wealth of the Rose and White Rose family. But this year, Matthew Rose White Rose did not come. She only brought a greeting letter from her sister Marilyn. In the letter she mainly asked about List and Achi and revealed her admiration for List. She also mentioned that she had graduated from the aristocratic girls' school in the Iron and Steel Ridge Kingdom and returned to live in the Grand Duchy of Rose. She also hoped that List would bless her next birthday. Anyway, this was the signal of marriage. As long as List agreed, the Rose and White Rose family would immediately send Marilyn over and make her the queen of the Fire Kingdom. But absorbing the Phoenix incarnation could prolong his life. After a few hundred years of life, he had little need for marriage and children. In fact, even if he had a strong need, he would not marry a woman he had never met. White paper and glass products in exchange for platinum potions and red dragon water. This friendship can continue. However, when the Fire Kingdom is established next year, our friendship will probably break apart. I'm such a scary person. I'm willing to sacrifice my body for my dragon. TSK. Thinking of this, he wrote a formal reply without showing any enthusiasm. Maybe he found his conscience. He even hoped that the Rose and White Rose family would find out his indifference and break off the idea of marriage. In any case, he did not want an innocent girl to be involved in the politics of the adults. After writing the reply, he sent someone to deliver it. It was the last day of December, the day before the New Year's Day. For several days he had been feasting with his followers and conferring new titles. Under the relaxed promotion environment, a large number of knights had become nobles, and small nobles had easily become big nobles. When it came to the level of count and above, the promotion process would be very strict. So far, except for the nobles who already had the title of Duke and Marquis, they could easily get their titles back. Only Emily was conferred the title of Marquis because of her success in riding a dragon. As for the Duke, there was still only Piero Grey-Iron, a noble with a title. Although List intended to promote his father to a duke, the promotion ceremony would be held after the founding of the country. However, the promotion ceremony would be held after the founding of the nation. William Lee was still a marquis. There were also the 7 mermaids who were very powerful and helped him manage the sea. In the future they would gradually be conferred the title of duke. They were originally kings of the sea, and on land they were at least equivalent to grand dukes. However, at this time the kingdom of the sea had long been destroyed. The purification of the Devil's Sea required a chi to preside over. Therefore, the title of duke was the highest title that List could give to the mermaids. In the future, I can set a precedent in the Fire Kingdom. The limit of a Sky Knight is Marquis. As long as I break through the shackles of perfection and become a Domain Knight, I can continue to advance to duke. This way, D. Maria Rainflowerstone and the other followers will have even more enthusiasm to do things. For most nobles, becoming a marquis was their greatest goal in life. After all, very few non-dragon-raising families could become dukes. Once they became marquises, these great nobles would lose their drive. As for the Dragon Knight, I'm afraid that under my rule, it will be difficult for a new dragon-raising family to be born. List rode the invisible dragon Bart, flying slowly in the sky. Because all the dragons that can be discovered will eventually become my dragons, and I refuse to let anyone touch them. He still remembered the scene he saw when he activated the Scepter of Time. Although it was only a possibility in the future, he deeply remembered what the future Achi had said. Achi told him to ride all the dragons and told him that the fairy dragon was in the land of exile. Everyone can share the elves, but the dragons must belong to me. At this moment, List stood at the top of the sacred mountain of the Killing Moon people, looking at the vigorous construction of the future palace. He was very proud of himself. All of this was fought for by him. After asking Achi, Emily, Father, and the others, the sacred mountain of the Killing Moon people finally has a new name. The mountain range on the left is called Moon Mountain, the mountain range on the right is called Sun Mountain, and the valley is called Sun Moon Valley. As for the palace standing between Moon Mountain and Sun Mountain, it is called Sun Moon Palace. Heaven and earth were black and yellow, the universe was chaotic. The sun and the moon were dim and the constellations were arranged. The meaning of the name Sun Moon Palace was to include the universe, and Sun Mountain and Moon Mountain were to inherit the glory of the Moon Empire and the Sun Empire in the ancient times. All countries liked to claim that they were the direct descendants of the Moon Empire, showing off that they had inherited the ancient civilization. List simply caught them all at once. Not only did he inherit the Moon Empire, but he also inherited the Sun Empire. In addition, many countries like to name their cities, palaces, and surnames after dragons. The palace of the Iron and Steel Ridge Kingdom was called the Platinum Tooth Palace, after the Platinum Dragon, Platinum Dragon. The palace of the Eagle Kingdom was called the Iron Dragon Chain Palace, after the White Iron Dragon. The palace of the Blast Furnace Kingdom was called the Golden Supreme Palace, after the Golden Dragon. The founders of these royal families were probably the Platinum Dragon Knight, the White Iron Dragon Knight, and the Golden Dragon Knight. Therefore, the palace was named after them. However, Liszt had too many dragons and every single one of them was a Dragon Knight. Naming one dragon after another was too narrow, and there was no way to be fair. He used the flame as his surname, the name of the kingdom, and the status of the fire dragon Leo. He could still use his first time riding a dragon as an excuse. If he named them after any other dragons, it would cause the dissatisfaction of the other dragons. As a dragon knight of many dragons, he had to balance it. His heart was so tired. He really wanted to train a group of dragon knight to share the burden. The construction of the Sun Moon Palace is 1/3 complete. In another half a year the main part should be completed and then we can move in. After the main part is completed, the remaining parts are some wonders. This requires the cooperation of magic shooters, so there is no hurry. I'll leave it to Achi. Women all like to decorate their own houses. Liszt simply handed over the spectacular style to Achi to play with. Needless to say, Achi was really interested in this aspect. She had already taken the time to design all kinds of wonders. Some of the creativity even amazed Liszt, such as flying moats, vertical elevators, small magic doors, air parks, artificial sun, moon and stars, crystal colorful covers, dragon sculptures of equal proportions, eternal torches, endless cumulonimbus clouds. She wanted to make the Sun Moon Palace a place where God lived. Don't mess around too much, Achi. You still have to save where it's necessary. After all, our family is big and we have several dragons to feed. Achi stuck out her little tongue playfully. Brother, don't worry. Achi is just using the Sun Moon Palace to do experiments to verify some magic technical problems, hee hee. Liszt only smiled. Then he rubbed Achi's beautiful blue hair hard. No matter what it was, he wanted it. Chapter 1048. Dang 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 dang. When the clock on top of Fire City's office struck 6, it signified the arrival of the new year. Year 156 of the Sapphire calendar had passed, and the year 157 had officially begun. Liszt, who had just returned from inspecting the Palace of Stars, stood on the balcony of Fire Castle, looking at the starry night sky. Not long after, countless magic fireworks were shot into the sky from Fire City, the surrounding towns and the castles. Magic transformed into colorful fireworks. Flowers bloomed in the night sky, bringing the New Year's atmosphere to a climax. It's a pity that there's no unknown reward for the smoke mission this year. I feel like something's missing. He shook his head. He summoned the smoke mission. The content of the mission was still the same. Mission: 202 choices of fate, guidance and prediction. You've grown from a small feudal lord to the ruler of a country. As the Fire Kingdom is about to be established, perhaps it's time to think more deeply. Please touch the barrier. Reward: blessing of fate. Touch the barrier. This was a huge problem. He had been pondering about this for nearly half a year. He had been improving his training methods with Leo, the fire dragon, who had already branded him with the spiritual brand. He tried various beneficial combat aura and magic circulation systems. He still couldn't touch the barrier. He didn't even have a clue about it. Among the other dragons, the invisible dragon bard's spiritual brand was becoming clearer and clearer. It wouldn't be long before it was completely branded. Gray Iron Dragon Orn and Bronze Dragon Marta also had a blurry image. However, these two dragons didn't have much of an impression of him, so their training speed was slower. Aluminum Dragon Connor and Water Dragon Wouter didn't show any signs of a brand yet. Bone Dragon Winnie wasn't a complete dragon, so there was no spiritual brand. As for Light Emerald Dragon Ethan, who had been branded with the spiritual brand, it had become Emily's mount. Liszt didn't continue training with it. His relationship with Ethan was very strange. Ethan was essentially his dragon, but the knight was Emily. It was like one dragon on two boats. As long as Liszt was willing, he could rely on the spiritual brand to take over Ethan. However, he usually blocked the telepathic link with Ethan. Just like how the first-generation Dragon Knight was already dead, Emily was controlling the dragon's basic will with the soul brand alone. I've been training with Leo for a long time, but we couldn't find any clues about the barrier. Also, this shouldn't be something that can be slowly figured out over time. Otherwise, since the establishment of the knight system, there have been countless talented dragon knights. Some of them must have broken through the barrier and achieved extraordinary things. However, the truth was that a perfect Dragon Knight was the pinnacle. There was no existence above the Dragon Knight. The situation of the unsetting Radiance Empire and the Blue Dragon Empire was unknown, but List had already learned about the Dragon Knight of the Noble Frost Empire through Laird Truth. There was no one stronger than the Dragon Knight. As a Dark Dragon Knight, their Emperor, Emperor Jupiter, was the strongest Dragon Knight in the Frost Empire. Now, we just have to wait for a Chi to grasp the inspiration and decipher the Stronghold's information. If a Chi fails as well, I can only hope that Bard will be able to take another look at the Weave Dragon that broke the barrier. As his thoughts drifted, he heard someone call him. "Your Majesty, what are you thinking about?" List came back to his senses and found that it was Paris who had followed him to the balcony. During the New Year's Day, he was used to inviting some of his close, single followers to Fire Castle to celebrate the New Year's Day together. There was no restriction on men and women, but the close male followers had families. Only Paris, Emily, Chris Truth, Kenley Truth, Mary Dawn Daybreak and other women were still single and had no relatives. Paris had a younger sister, Maggie, who had been adopted back in Flower Town. Therefore this year Paris was still spending the New Year's Day in Fire Castle. The former Black Dragon Gang was now a light magic swordsman with the title of Count. Her training system was quite interesting. Most of the systems were completely new and were derived by the Light Magic Swordsman Research Group specially established by the Guild of Magic. The Light Magic Swordsman Research Group belonged to the Dragon Warrior Laboratory, which led the development of the Light Magic Swordsman, Fire Magic Swordsman, Shadow Incarnation and other cultivation systems. Among them, the development of Shadow Incarnation was set up after the capture of the King of Shadows, Louis Shadow. They had wanted to use Louis as a breakthrough point, but in the end it was all for naught. Therefore, the Dragon Warrior Laboratory still had to refer to Paris training along the way to formulate a follow-up training system. Think about the future. List looked up at the sky with his hands behind his back. The magic fireworks in the sky were already sparse, and only the mages in the Mage Tower in the distance were still playing with magic fireworks tirelessly. The future. Paris gathered a strand of hair hanging by her ear and sighed faintly. Today she was not wearing her favorite leather armor, or the frac abier, which represented the title of nobility. Instead, she changed into a lady's dress that aristocratic ladies loved to wear. It had a loose skirt, a slender waist and a pleated neckline, just enough to expose her beautiful collarbone. The original valiant and heroic style was replaced by a feminine delicacy and sexiness, and every move was charming and seductive. "Why are you sighing?" asked List. Paris smiled faintly. "Maybe it's because I'm getting old. After the new year I'll be 24 years old and I've been following His Majesty for 5 years. 5 years? Well, speaking of which, I'm also 22 years old this year. After his coming-of-age ceremony at the age of 16, he transmigrated to this world in March of year 151 of the Sapphire calendar. Then, in December he met Paris. He had indeed known Paris for 5 years, and in another 3 months, it would be 6 years since he transmigrated to this world. Too much had changed in the past 6 years. Many 22-year-old knight may only be an Earth Knight, but His Majesty has risen from nothing to become a king of a country and a great Dragon Knight. The greatest fortune in Paris' life is to follow His Majesty. She did not hide the admiration and adoration in her eyes. Such a heroic figure, even a woman would find it difficult to hide such emotions. List enjoyed the admiration in her eyes and could not help but respond gently, "Meeting you is also my fortune, Paris. The past events of the Flower Town still surface in my mind from time to time." "Your Majesty, do you really think that meeting Paris is also a fortune?" "Of course." Paris' breathing became a bit heavy, and the emotions in her eyes were so intense that it seemed like they were about to drip water. After a while, she calmed down a little. "I really hope that His Majesty does not feel that you are lucky. Your luck makes it hard for me to control myself." List raised his eyebrows. "Why do you say that?" Paris raised her head and looked straight into List's eyes. "I used to hide my admiration for His Majesty, but it still pops up from time to time. My reason tells me that I shouldn't have any extravagant hopes, but my emotions are like moths. Even if it is a flame, I will still throw myself into it regardless of my own safety." This was a bold confession, and also the first time she had expressed her admiration. List was caught off guard, but after all, he had been in pleasure circles for many years. He just reached out and lifted Paris's chin. The other party's height of 1.75 meters was very outstanding among women, but in front of his height of 1.9 meters it was nothing. Are you ready to be a moth flying into a flame? Chapter 1049. It was a wonderful feeling, like a moth flying into a flame. Good news came just after the new year. This time it was from Bard the Invisible Dragon. While List was busy socializing during the new year, Bard wandered aimlessly in the world outside of the material world. Ever since the magic teleportation array was built, he no longer had to worry about getting lost. Unexpectedly, he found a natural node. After opening it, he found himself on the west coast of Flames Island, in an area of islands and reefs. He still remembered that List had always wanted to open more teleportation arrays on Flames Island and build the island into a transportation network that extended in all directions. There was no doubt that this was a very valuable natural node. It could connect the west coast of Flames Island to the transportation network. So, List followed Bard here excitedly to inspect the environment. The waves of the sea kept crashing against the reefs. The scenery of the blue sea and blue sky made him feel a sense of pride. I just want to recite a poem in this situation. Facing the rock to the east, watching the sea from the west. How dark the water is and the mountains stand tall. Trees are everywhere and the grass is lush. This poem did not fit in with the scenery here. There were no trees in the reef area, and it was not in the East Sea, but in the West Sea about 100 meters offshore. Standing on the reef, one could see the coastline in the distance. There was a beach that stretched as far as the eye could see. The sand was white and clean, and occasionally there were one or two trees that looked like fragrant coconut trees. Further away there were sparse bushes, and the land was mostly sand and gravel, not suitable for farming. The soil and water in the northwest half of Flames Island were not as good as in the southeast half. There were few dense forests and it was more like a grassland or a desert. The mages of the Guild of Magic had done long-term research here. The rainfall was obviously less than that of the southeast half, and it was very dry in winter. Although the northwest half is not livable, it does not mean that there is no land suitable for farming. There are a few river basins and it can be developed into a land of fish and rice. Moreover, the terrain is relatively flat, suitable for grazing. In the future, it can become a large pasture for the Fire Kingdom. Therefore, it was very necessary to build a large city on the east coast. In the future, if he wanted to build a teleportation magic array to communicate with the other regions of the Blazing Island, this place would undoubtedly be the most suitable. Bard, fly freely here for a while. I'm going to explore the underwater environment of the reef area and see if there's anything special about this place that can create a natural node, List said as he summoned the little water dragon, Wouter, who had already attached itself to his kidneys. Walter did not have a suitable dragon nest, so he could not absorb water element supreme demons every day. Therefore his body's development was very slow, and he did not grow at all. Leo, on the other hand, had used the volcano to nurture his supreme demon, which allowed him to improve by leaps and bounds. Yo-ho! After Walter flew out, he landed on the surface of the water and looked around curiously. Then List rode on it and connected their minds as one. In an instant, they submerged into the sea and searched for every trace of special existence at the bottom of the sea. Any natural node could be related to the supreme demons. Or rather, it had something to do with dragons. Dragons were the source of most supreme magic. He cast Magic Eye. Synchronizing with Wouter, his field of vision was soon replaced by that of a water dragon. Every trace of water in the sea was presented in his eyes, and the simple Magic Eye was strengthened several times. This was the same principle as the fire dragon Leo's Dragon Eye Track. List was too lazy to rename it, so he still called it Dragon Eye Track. Elemental dragons could probably synchronize with Magic Eye, and so could invisible dragons. Only metal dragons, gem dragons, and bone dragons were not compatible with Magic Eye. Dragon Eye Track kept scanning. He scanned every reef on the seabed, but did not find any signs of magic, not even a single sea monster. The natural nodes are between the reefs, not under the sea. It's hard to tell what happened when the supreme magic formed the natural nodes. Roland nodded. After searching back and forth carefully, he still did not find any clues related to magic. In the end, he could only declare the search a failure. There was no treasure left by the dragons at this natural node. Perhaps it was just a supreme magic wave caused by a fight between dragons in ancient times that caused the natural node. Before this, there were several natural nodes that he could not find anything. Let's call it the Reef Natural Node. I plan to build a reef city here. After deciding on the name of the reef city, List recalled the little water dragon Wouter. He rode on Invisible Dragon Bard and left for the mermaid city. He wanted to ask the mermaids to send a group of ugly fish to the reef city to build a city. The aquaculture industry was not prosperous enough, and many ugly fish had nothing to do. So, he decided to let them participate in the construction of the city so that they would not waste their energy. Your Majesty, the water here is very good and there are many fish. It's a natural fishing ground, said the mermaid lost Marquis Kukulizi. You found a school of fish? Yes, I felt it. There are large schools of fish wandering around in the sea nearby. That's good. It's more suitable to build the reef city here. Now that Marquis Brackish Water, Bruce Bossy, is in charge of the mermaid city, you can take charge of the reef city here. Build the city half on the sea and half on land. In the future this will be the central city of the East Coast. As you wish, Your Majesty. Kulizi nodded in agreement. Although the era of the mermaids had passed, as the remaining mermaids, their biggest wish was to purify the sea. But this did not mean that they did not have desires, especially when the Magic Guild was helping them develop the source of vitality potion that could stimulate fertility. This gave them the possibility to reproduce, and their desires were also born. They had their own demands for power and status, and even secretly competed with each other. Currently, the fugitive Marquis Viswendi had signed a contract with Achi with the Mermaid's Heart and became the butler of the Anchor Island Sea Laboratory. He was in charge of the marine experiments and began to take the path of magic research. Marquis of Great West, Etnia, as the oldest mermaid, mainly served as List's assistant in the sea, and was responsible for protecting List when he was out at sea. Marquis Brackish Water, Bruce Bossy, was in charge of the mermaid city. List had already negotiated with her to give the mermaid's heart to Emily. As a dragon knight of the sea, it would be a pity if she did not know how to swim. That was why List let Emily contract the mermaid's heart, adding a life-saving skill. Marquis Gulvig was a field agent, and her temporary duties were very interesting. List specially ordered her to move the dragon turtles of the Dragon Turtle Island and the Thunder Dragon Turtle of the Black Horse Island to the Flame Islands by sea. The Thunder Dragon Turtle was a super dragon beast, and the ordinary dragon turtles were also high-level World of Warcraft, which was very valuable. Marquis Kulizi, the Lost Marquis, would be in charge of the Reef City. Marquis of Water, Tiberius, and Marquis of Trench, Sheriwala, were left. List was going to send these two mermaids to the Heart Island to protect the safety of the Heart Island. As the Flame Kingdom's only two gates to the outside world, the importance of the Heart Island was self-evident. By the way, Coco Rich, when do you plan to depart for your plan to travel around the legendary continent's coastal waters? List asked. Marquis Etnia thinks that this spring is a very suitable season. A year's time is enough for us to cruise the entire legendary continent's coastal waters. We want to see if there are any mermaids or inferior races like Naga and clownfish. The sea used to be so prosperous, but now it's lonely everywhere. Coco Rich's tone was rather melancholic. Chapter 1050. Big Dragon Died applies for leave. Currently typing, please wait a moment. After the content has been updated, please refresh the page to receive the latest update. Chapter 1051. List did not know how big the legendary continent was. Based on some of his previous speculations and Achi's research on astronomy, List was able to estimate it. It could be roughly deduced that this world was a huge sphere. However, due to the imperfection of the theory and the lack of measuring equipment, a more precise verification could not be completed. Hence, there was no way to calculate how big the legendary continent was. And in these few years, even if List became a dragon knight and Achi became a magic shooter, they still didn't have time to travel the world. Their range of activities was basically in the northeast corner of the legendary continent, as well as the Aquamarine Sea and the Shell Sea. The furthest they could go was the edge of the Devil Sea. His knowledge of this planet was limited to the fact that there were two continents in the Endless Ocean, the legendary continent and the Malfa continent. However, the distribution of these two continents on the planet was not easy to determine. Since it was impossible to determine the distribution of the land, the distribution of the sea was naturally not very clear. Sometimes, List wondered if the legendary continent and the Malfa continent were similar to the Eurasian continent and the American continent, on the two hemispheres of the planet. Without the support of actual investigation data, he could only make wild guesses. Coincidentally, 7 mermaids were resurrected this time. Lamenting the decline of the mermaids, the 7 mermaids decided to travel around the sea to see if there were any other mermaids who survived. List then asked the mermaids to bring along the sextant to map the coastline of the legendary continent. At the same time, they also wanted to map the depth and location of the ocean. Right now, Merfolk City can't do without Burabosi's command, and once Reef City is built, you'll be in charge of it as well. I can only let Etnia and the others travel around the sea in groups. Your Majesty, why don't we postpone the construction of Reef City? I also want to travel the seas. His Excellency Acheroids had studied the demons for a long time, but it would still take a long time before he could truly begin to purify the Devil's Sea. I want to take advantage of this period of time to see the sea. In my era I have never seen the sea properly. Oh, then it's decided. He nodded in agreement. Actually, he didn't want all the mermaids to go around the ocean and not work. Now that the Fire Kingdom was in full swing, a large number of ugly fish could be used to make up for the lack of labor. They couldn't do without the mermaids at all. However, he did not want to exploit them too much, so he was willing to give the mermaids a certain amount of freedom. Perhaps on this trip around the ocean, they would be able to find more mermaids who had survived and bring them back to the Fire Kingdom. Therefore, he generously sent the mermaids on their journey. Only the Marquis of Saltwater, Buru Bushi, had no choice but to stay behind. He continued to oversee the mermaid city, commanding the ugly fish laborers to participate in the construction. I don't know what they will gain from this trip. Let's not talk about whether they can find the mermaids who survived. The coastline of the legendary continent will definitely be mapped out. I just don't know if there are any other gains outside of the legendary continent. The mermaid's circumnavigation of the sea was just an interlude. Liszt quickly put it to the back of his mind, not completely. He had a contract with the mermaids, and with the help of the contract he could communicate with them over long distances and keep track of their movements. It was just that he was very busy with work now. The spring plowing had already begun, and the schools in various cities had already opened. As the king of the Kingdom of Fire, he could not help but show his face at some of the spring plowing sites to show his concern for the work, or he could go to school to give a speech, especially to the Royal Academy, to gain the loyalty of a wave of young knight. The Dragon Knight selection plan had finally opened, and 3 people had been selected. They were Hippolyta, the Moonslayer who had previously protected the elves, Nikolai Bellows, the grandson of the Iron Knight family Count Nikolai Bellows, and de Gaulle, the posthumous son of an Earth Knight. Hippolyta had trained for less than 2 years, but she had already successfully become an elite Earth Knight. She was also very adaptable to potions, and had a high chance of becoming a Sky Knight before the age of 16. Thus, she barely qualified as a Dragon Knight candidate, and was recommended by the Royal Academy to participate in the Dragon Knight selection plan. Nikolai Bellows was not yet 16 years old, but he had already become a Sky Knight. He was a genius of the Bellows family. Although he aspired to become an Iron Knight, he also desired to become a Dragon Knight. As for de Gaulle, he was just an ordinary Earth Knight without a title. His mother brought him to live on Hot Spring Island. Following Liszt's crusade against the Count of Hot Spring Island, he was moved to live in the Kingdom of Fire. He was only 12 years old this year, but he was already an elite Earth Knight, and was also recommended by the Royal Academy. Hippolyta, Nikolai, de Gaulle, you should already know the meaning of the Dragon Knight selection plan. Apart from the 3 of you, only one person has been selected for the Fire Kingdom's Dragon Knight selection plan. She should have taught you all night classes in the Royal Academy. She is the light green gemstone Dragon Knight, Emily. Liszt looked at the 3 people in front of him and said with anticipation, everyone who is selected for the Dragon Knight selection plan is the future hope of the Fire Kingdom. You will enjoy the best treatment and you will strive to ride a dragon. However, it is extremely difficult to ride a dragon. Your talents are not enough to shock the legendary continent, and you can only rely on hard work. Your Majesty, can you tell us what preparation we need to do to ride a dragon? Nikolai asked. He was the oldest among the 3, and as a noble's son, he was also the most mature. At this moment he looked at Liszt fervently, looking forward to hearing more information about riding a dragon. He knew very well that the person in front of him was a terrifying existence that could ride 6 or 7 dragons all by himself. All the youngsters of the Fire Kingdom, especially the young knights, treated Liszt as their goal to strive for. Although this goal was too far away for them, the youngsters were always like newborn calves that were not afraid of tigers. They thought that if others could do it, they could do it too. Liszt's gaze swept across the 3 of them and he sized them up carefully. Nikolai was a young man with a noble's natural arrogance, and his looks were average. De Gaulle was still young, but he was already taller than Nikolai. He was just a little timid and uneasy, and it was said that he was very hard-working in private, just like Emily in the past. Hippolyta was slender and graceful, and she was natural and unrestrained. As a girl, other than her wheat-colored skin, she was a beauty in every other aspect. It was said that in the Royal Academy, the boys who admired Hippolyta could form in orders of chivalry. However, the Royal Academy forbade young people from dating under the age of 18, which was why they didn't get jealous in private. Riding a dragon is difficult, but it's also very simple. List's gaze lingered on Hippolyta's slightly bulging chest for a moment before moving away. A 16-year-old Sky Knight is just a threshold. It means that you will be able to perfect your fighting aura at a very young age. He paused for a moment before continuing. Perfecting one's fighting aura is the most basic requirement to attract a dragon. Being young is another criterion, but the most important is one's character. Dragons are arrogant and see humans as no different from ants. Without unshakable courage, unyielding perseverance, and loyalty and integrity, a dragon will not be able to be moved. Will courage, perseverance, and integrity be able to move a dragon? Nikolai asked again. No, it can only be said that with these qualities, you have the possibility of approaching a dragon. However, every dragon has their own requirements for choosing a knight, and you will need to explore and approach it yourself. It was still Nikolai who asked, "But Your Majesty, you have already ridden so many dragons. Does every single one of them have the same requirements for you?" List smiled. "I'm different. You don't have to use me as a role model. For me, it is the dragons that are begging me to ride them, not me who wants their approval." Nikolai de Gaulle and Hippolyta's eyes widened at the same time. "Ah? Please remember this book's domain name. 9 Heavens Xinhuang Mobile Version. Chapter 1052. List did not stay in the royal school for long to show his concern for the young people who had been selected as Dragon Knight candidates. There was no need for him to constantly show his existence. After all, the loyalty class in school was a compulsory course. Knight would receive brainwashing education from a young age to understand who was the true leader of the Fire Kingdom. In reality, List did not care much about the loyalty of a knight. Most of his followers were captives who had surrendered. There were not many who were loyal. He preferred to use benefits to rope in Knight and strengthen the system of the kingdom. Other than the feudal nobility, he also wanted to develop the Burning Legion. As a knight of the Fire family, this was a job that he valued. Recently, he had picked out a large group of knight who had achieved military service. Among them, he selected a small group of Fire Element elite Earth Knight with a weak background and brought them to the Phoenix Forest in the endless volcanoes. Red Sparrow, it's this kind of big red bird. It's slightly violent, but it can be tamed as a mount. Standing on a phoenix tree that was already as thick as an arm's length, List directly used the Awe of the Phoenix ability to summon a high-grade magical beast, a red sparrow. The Awe of the Phoenix was the ability of the Phoenix transformation. As he continued to develop it, he could now use it on a human body. The effect was not as strong as when he used the Phoenix transformation. However, if he used it on a single bird, it could achieve the same effect as when he used the Phoenix transformation. Coo-coo. The red sparrow stood beside List and intimately rubbed its neck against List's shoulder. In the distance, there was a large group of red sparrows chirping noisily. However, under the influence of the Awe of the Phoenix contract, they did not approach List. There were about 26 Fire Element elite Earth Knights. They were all young knight, none of them over 20 years old. At this moment, the knights were staring at the red sparrow with passionate eyes. They naturally understood the reason why His Majesty had brought them here. Fire Element Advanced World of Warcraft Red Sparrow. Originally, my plan was to reward a Fire Element Sky Knight to tame and ride it. However, the Fire Kingdom had yet to be established and the number of Sky Knights was low, so they were demoted to Elite Earth Knight. You are very lucky to have the opportunity to ride them. List said in a clear voice. This was the truth. Advanced World of Warcraft, especially the Flying type Advanced World of Warcraft, were extremely rare. A Flying type World of Warcraft that could be tamed and mounted was even rarer. Each of them was priceless and it would be a waste to give them to the Earth Knight. He had originally hoped to use the Cardinal, Fire Raven and Fire Dragon Bird as his mounts to build the Burning Legion's most elite guards, the Orders of Chivalry. Every member of the Orders of Chivalry had to have great talent and loyalty cultivated from a young age. Only in this way could they obtain the power to protect the palace and the king. However, such a harsh requirement would be difficult to achieve within a decade. Talents were hard to come by, especially those who were willing to give up their status as nobles. That was why he lowered his requirements again and again, to the point where he relaxed his requirements to the elite Fire Element Earth Knight who was below 20 years old, had no bad behavior records, and did not come from a noble background. However, if these knight could not become a Sky Knight within a few years, their mount could only be the Cardinal. They would not have the chance to touch the more powerful Super Warcraft Fire Raven. After the elite Earth Knight rides the Cardinal, they will become the Cardinal Squad under the Burning Legion's Orders of Chivalry. From now on, you will be responsible for protecting the palace. When you are 25 years old, if you successfully become a Sky Knight, you will have the right to change your mount to the Fire Raven. The Fire Raven will be upgraded to the Crow Squad under the Burning Legion's Orders of Chivalry. From now on, you will be responsible for protecting the palace. If you can achieve full combat energy before the age of 35, you will have the right to change your mount to the Fire Raven. You will become a knight riding a super dragon, a true royal knight. The Royal Orders of Chivalry had 3 squads: the Royal Guard Squad, the Crow Squad, and the Cardinal Squad. It was not a strict establishment of the Orders of Chivalry. It was more of an honorary establishment. Because Liszt himself had fire element combat energy, he was inclined to have a fire element knight as a royal guard. However, in the future he would definitely open it to all combat energy attribute knight and build more squads. Among them, the Royal Guard Squad was probably the highest level of glory. Only a knight who rode a super dragon beast could become a real imperial knight and obtain the right to escort the king when he went out. Currently, the only super dragon beasts that could be ridden in the Fire Kingdom were the Fire Raven and the Storm Dragon Horse. As for the Thunder Dragon Tortoise that was residing in the Mermaid City, it was the size of a small mountain and did not seem suitable for riding. There were 3 Storm Dragon Horses. The Storm Dragon Horse with its broken horn had become Lee William's new mount. As the father of a Dragon Knight and a Domain Knight, as well as being in charge of the administration of the Kingdom of Inferno, he indeed needed a mount that matched his status. Liszt let Lee William choose the Fire Raven and the Storm Dragon Horse. Lee William was not interested in the Fire Raven. He had water element combat energy and was not compatible with super dragon beasts of the fire element. Thus, he chose the Storm Dragon Horse of the wind element. He hoped to choose the 2 that did not have a broken horn. However, those 2 horses were arrogant and disdained Lee William. Even the Storm Dragon Horse with a broken horn was disdainful of him at first. In the end, it was Liszt who found a Chi and asked her to entrust Charlie the Unicorn to force the Storm Dragon Horse with a broken horn to agree to become Lee William's mount. After Lee William rode on the Storm Dragon Horse, the first thing he did was to forge a horn made of magical metal alloy for the Storm Dragon Horse and embed it on the broken horn. This allowed the Storm Dragon Horse to regain its confidence as a super dragon beast. Having its horn broken was a humiliation to the Storm Dragon Horse, and it had always felt inferior. Thus, the Storm Dragon Horse with a broken horn accepted Lee William. For a period of time, Lee William rode the Storm Dragon Horse every day, patrolling his territory and proudly showing off. The Storm Dragon Horse was not a unicorn. However, not many people knew the difference and no one knew how Lee William rode it. Thus, many people mistakenly believed that Lee William's ability to ride a unicorn meant that he was an upright, righteous, and noble knight. After all, Lee William was not a pure virgin knight. After all, his grandchildren could run all over the place. Lee William's prestige soared because of this. Screech! The blazing dragon bird cried out crisply in the distance. It was the Phoenix dragon elf, Ainfant. She flew over on Little Red and landed beside Liszt. Ainfant, who was wearing a small armor, jumped off the bird and stood on a branch. He was right next to Liszt. Liszt, are you here to inspect the flock of blazing birds? Yes, Ainfant. I'm here to pick a few red birds for my knight to ride. Oh, they look very weak. Little Red said that it could fight 100 of them. Ainfant turned his head and looked at the 26 human knights standing on the ground. Little Red also cried out in agreement. Screech! Liszt patted Ainfant's head. They are still young. There is still room for improvement. Boring. I'm going to train. I will become a powerful knight. Liszt, you can send me to join the war. Go train well. After sending Ainfant away, Liszt sent the 26th knight to tame the red birds. Your Majesty, can we really tame Advanced World of Warcraft? A knight asked with uncertainty. Advanced World of Warcraft gave them too much pressure. A normal elite Earth Knight could only fight against a low-level World of Warcraft. Most of the Kingdom's Knight are still capturing low-level World of Warcraft. As a knight, it is indeed difficult for you to tame an Advanced World of Warcraft. However, I believe in your future. I will allow you to be protected by my glory. Go, these red birds will bow down to you. With the power of awe of the Phoenix, Liszt naturally had a way to make the red birds sign a beast-taming contract with the knight. However, the beast-taming contract was not a binding contract. He cautiously added, I can let you sign a contract with the red birds. However, if you want to gain the approval of the red birds, you will need to work hard. Once the red birds break free from the contract, you will lose the right to receive orders of chivalry. The knight was stunned. Losing the right to receive orders of chivalry was equivalent to losing List's trust. This was more nerve-wracking than losing an advanced World of Warcraft mount. My condition has been really bad recently. I'm sorry everyone. Please remember this book's domain name. 9 Heavens Godly Emperor Mobile Version. Chapter 1053. The Orders of Chivalry Cardinal Squad had been formed. 26 Fire Elite Earth Knights had all signed a taming contract with the Cardinal with the help of List. The Cardinal Squad would be the first batch of knight to protect the Fire Kingdom. Of course they were only in reserve. They had to wait for the Cardinal to establish a close relationship with them and not rebel before the real Cardinal Squad could be determined. No matter what, this batch of knight would be the backbone of the Burning Legion in the future and would be the direct knight of the Flame family. The Fire Kingdom that they guarded had not been completely built, but the main framework had been formed. In such a fantasy world full of magic, the construction industry was not developed enough, but as long as one was willing to spend resources and mobilize mages to participate in the construction. The speed, quality, and difficulty of construction were definitely more efficient than the high-tech construction methods on Earth. It just so happened that the Moonkill natives on Flame Island relied on magic dust to cultivate a large number of ancient mages. They participated in the construction and took on the most difficult parts so that the city was built quickly. Moreover, there was the Guild of Magic coordinating and developing more construction techniques. The Fire Kingdom was the highest platform to test the construction standards of the Fire Kingdom, and it was planned as a whole. Most of the cities under the Knight system were built spontaneously, without a complete city plan. The Fire Kingdom was planned to be a large city with a population of 500,000 from the beginning, with streets and blocks arranged in a radial pattern. In the center was the landmark of the city, a huge stone gate, the Arc de Triomphe. This was List's bad taste imitating Paris. An avenue that ran from the north to the south passed through the Arc de Triomphe. This avenue was called the Gilt Avenue. It could carry 10 carriages side by side, which was the distance of 20 warhorses. In addition to this Gilt Avenue, there were 5 other avenues that crossed the Arc de Triomphe. Of course, because of the direction of the Arc de Triomphe, these roads could only go around the Arc de Triomphe, forming a big turntable around it. Only the Gilt Avenue could pass through the Arc de Triomphe unimpeded. The 5 avenues and the Gilt Avenue divided the Fire Kingdom into 12 radial fan-shaped areas. In a clockwise direction. The area from 12 o'clock to 1 o'clock was the administrative area, the area from 1 o'clock to 2 o'clock was the education area, and the area from 2 o'clock to 3 o'clock was the green area. The area from 3 o'clock to 4 o'clock was the business district. The area from 4 o'clock to 5 o'clock was the civilian residential area, and the area from 5 o'clock to 6 o'clock was the business district. The area from 6 to 7 o'clock was the civilian residential area, the area from 7 to 8 o'clock was the storage area, and the area from 8 to 9 o'clock was the magic area. The area from 9 to 10 o'clock was the green area, the area from 10 to 11 o'clock was the noble residential area, and the area from 11 to 12 o'clock was the military area. Of course, this was only a rough distribution. Every fan-shaped area was divided by countless streets, which were further subdivided into many smaller areas. List, who had a great pursuit of greenery, requested that every small area should have a park, and every small street should have an eye-catching public toilet. In short, the future Fire King city would be a clean and tidy city with lush greenery. The cities of other countries would always be accompanied by a large amount of feces, sewage, and other dirty things. Only in the Fire King city he would not allow such uncivilized phenomena to exist. In fact, even if there was no government to clean up the feces, the civilians would still rob it clean. Feces could help crops grow. This was already common knowledge among the Fire King citizens. Compared to the extravagant elves that only the nobles had the qualifications to use, feces could be produced by both humans and animals, and it could help all kinds of crops. There were many small peddlers who specialized in selling feces, transporting feces from the city to the major plantations, causing the phenomenon of people defecating in the wild to disappear. The civilians would keep their feces to sell for money. The nobles would buy feces at a high price to farm. But there was a problem, and that was that transporting feces from the city would inevitably pollute the air. List requested that the Fire King city build underground tunnels that were very wide, and could allow carriages to run in them. The feces would be transported out of the city through the underground tunnels. At this moment, after returning from the Phoenix Parasol Forest with the Red Sparrow squad, List stayed in the Fire King city to inspect. Today he was inspecting the sewers. At this moment there were not many people living in the Fire King city, so the sewers had not started transporting feces and sewage. Light is a very big problem. The underground tunnels are very deep and this is a place where light cannot reach. It is very easy to breed evil here. Liszt said to Gort and the others who followed him. Gort was specially sent by him to supervise the construction of the Fire King city. The former fallen Lord Knight was now a viscount, and one of the development committee members. Your Majesty, when the Fire King city is in operation, I will order the King's administration to form a special patrol orders of chivalry to protect the safety of the underground tunnels, and not let any filth survive here. Gort said with a powerful voice. Following Liszt's continuous rise in status, he had already adapted to his current status. Although his strength was still a pitiful trainee knight, as Liszt's representative, he would not belittle himself. Patrol is a must. After all, other than transporting feces, sewage, and garbage, the underground tunnels also exist as an emergency passageway and a channel for supplies. However, if the light problem is not solved, it will always be a hidden danger. Has the Guild of Magic not come to fruition yet? I'm not sure about this. The management of the Guild of Magic is not under my jurisdiction. The two presidents, Crazy and Kenley, should know. Your Majesty, do you need to contact them? The members of the development committee had their own responsibilities, and would not cross the line easily. Chairman Lee William Tulip was in charge of overall planning, Deputy Chairman D. Maria Iwashi was in charge of diplomacy, Emily was in charge of military affairs, Piero Grayiron was in charge of trade, Elton Golden Chrysanthemum was in charge of agriculture, Geoffrey Furonqui was in charge of justice, Durut Red Apricot was in charge of communications, and Paris was in charge of finance. Gort Mast was in charge of the city construction, Marcus Wheel was in charge of education. Of the two special members, Crazy Truth was in charge of the Guild of Magic and the various departments of the Fire Kingdom, and Kenley Truth was in charge of the Guild of Magic scientific research. Contact them, Liszt said. Soon, Gort instructed his assistant to contact Crazy and Kenley through the magic platform. Liszt asked directly, how's the progress of the magic light bulb that I asked the Guild of Magic to develop? Your Majesty, there are preliminary results. The problem of magical luminescence has been solved, but glass products cannot replace crystal, so magic cannot be used stably. We have not found a material that can replace crystal, so we have not developed the magic light bulb that Your Majesty hopes for. The magic light bulb, as the name suggested, was made using magic light bulbs. There should be a physical phenomenon of magnetism producing electricity in this world, but Liszt did not understand it and could not develop it in depth. After all, he had not even figured out the steam engine. So he decided to avoid electricity and directly use magic to achieve some advanced technology. The magic light bulb was one of the ideas. There was already a magic equipment like crystal lamps, so it was only a matter of cheap mass production of crystal lamps. Once the magic light bulb was developed, the city could be brightly lit at night, which would greatly increase the working time. In the past, most people would obediently go to bed at night, but with the magic light bulb, they could at least work until midnight, which would definitely greatly improve the efficiency of work. Liszt could not help but urge Crazy and Kenley, hurry up and break the shackles of thinking. Look for more materials. We have even solved the problem of magical luminescence, so it's not difficult to find a suitable carrier. Tell those arcanists, whoever can find the suitable materials, I will sponsor them to set up their own magic laboratory. Chapter 1054. The Association of Mages grew larger and larger. However, Liszt, who was always on guard against the revival of sorcerers, had gradually changed the concept of magic. The current Association of Mages was more like the Chinese Academy of Sciences. Sorcerers gradually adapted to the identity of arcanists and engaged in professional magic development work. Gradually, under the influence of Liszt, arcanists began to specialize in different fields according to their interests and specialties. For example, medical arcanists, magic equipment arcanists, magic array arcanists, potion arcanists, machinery arcanists, and so on. However, the Chinese Academy of Sciences was an elite organization of scientists, while the Association of Mages was an organization of all sorcerers. It could be seen as a combination of the Chinese Academy of Sciences and the Ministry of Science and Technology, and also included functions such as Health Committee, integration of production, study, and research and development of magic technology, education and training of arcanists, and finally use arcanists and magic technology to participate in the construction of the kingdom. At the same time, the Association of Mages adopted the Chief Arcanist system. This was a magic management system, mainly to set up the position of Chief Arcanist in magic research projects and national institutions. The Chief Arcanist would be responsible for the project, managing the project's funds, resources, and so on. Because of the need for magic light bulbs, List decided to take out an excessive reward and sponsor an Arcanist to set up an independent magic laboratory, which was equivalent to promoting the Arcanist to Chief Arcanist. In the field of magic, this was definitely a step to the sky, becoming a boss-level figure in the industry. One had to know that there were so many registered sorcerers in the Association of Mages, but no more than 20 had the position of Chief Arcanist and had their own independent laboratory. Most of the sorcerers were only assigned to do odd jobs in the laboratory, or to participate in the construction of the administrative offices in various cities. The Association of Mages had set up more than 50 magic laboratories to carry out various research projects, but most of the laboratories were under the names of a Chi and Laird. Only magic shooters were qualified to continuously open magic laboratories and create all kinds of new research projects. Your Majesty, with such a tempting reward, I'm afraid most of the Arcanists in the Association of Mages will not be in the mood to do their own work for a period of time. They will all be focused on finding carriers for magic light bulbs, Chris responded a little helplessly. She was too familiar with the young Dragon Knight, His Majesty the King of Fire. Sometimes she could feel his far-sighted strategic planning, which led to the establishment of the Magic Association. Sometimes she could also feel that his ideas were simply unconstrained and untraceable. In other words, he could do whatever he wanted. But no matter what, Chris would faithfully execute List's orders. She had long decided to serve List with all her might for the rest of her life. Not only was he returning the favor of saving his life, but he was also dedicating himself to the truth. List smiled. That's for the best. Only then can the importance of the magic light bulb be demonstrated. I'm just curious, Your Majesty. Is the magic light bulb really that important? We have crystal lamps. Even though they're expensive, the crystal Cyathea forest can provide us with large amounts of crystals. The light emerald dragon Ethan can also produce large amounts of crystals. With the cultivation of the crystal Cyathea forest, crystals were no longer a scarce commodity, and crystal lamps could be mass-produced. You don't understand. Crystal lamps are too limited to the use of nobles and mages. They can't conquer the darkness. Only by developing cheap magic light bulbs can we conquer the darkness to the greatest extent. List explained casually. But after thinking about it carefully, it did not seem to make much sense. Edison invented the light bulb, which was an application of electricity. It announced the advent of the electrical age and the beginning of the Second Industrial Revolution. But the current magic light bulb, apart from increasing labor efficiency and enriching nightlife, seemed to have nothing to do with the Industrial Revolution. Of course, whether it was meaningful or not, List wanted to create the magic light bulb. Originally, he thought that to find a suitable carrier for the magic light bulb, he would have to try and fail more than 1,000 times, just like Edison's invention of the light bulb. But List did not expect that less than 3 days after the reward was issued, a mage would announce that he had found the carrier material for the magic light bulb. In the Mage Tower of Fireforge City, List met this mage. The young mage was called Orvish Truth. He had just advanced from a mage apprentice to a mage. His arcanist identity was a magic equipment arcanist, and his main research direction was the creation of magic equipment. Your Majesty, this is the most suitable carrier for the magic light bulb. The young Orvis excitedly took out a bright light bulb. The light bulb was round, which was List's idea. But there was an additional calabash at the bottom of the light bulb. It was an ordinary calabash, a common climbing plant in the primeval forest of the Fire Kingdom. It was similar to the calabashes on Earth. The light bulb was inserted into the mouth of the calabash, flashing with an unstable bluish-white light. Calabash? Yes, the most common calabashes in the calabash plantation. I used the calabashes to store some special magic potions. Then I suddenly thought, why not use the calabash to inject magic power into it so that the magic light bulb can continuously maintain the required magic power? Thinking of this, he began to try. At first he did not have high hopes. After all, the calabash was just an ordinary plant, not something with magic power. But unexpectedly, after he injected magic power into it, he found that the magic power did not dissipate. Thus the calabash magic light bulb was born. Using the eye of magic, List could naturally see through this calabash magic light bulb. It was filled with water magic power. It was flowing slowly inside the calabash, providing magic power for the illuminating magic array in the glass bulb at the top. The consumption was very small, and with the magic power of this calabash, it could be used for at least a year. Very good. Liszt patted Orvis on the shoulder and was not stingy with his praise. You are a lucky arcanist. Of course, luck is also a part of strength. I have high hopes for you, Orvis. From today onwards, I will sponsor you to set up an independent magic laboratory of your own. Thank you, Your Majesty, thank you so much. Orvis trembled with excitement and bowed deeply to Liszt. This is a reward that you deserve. Liszt turned around and said to Chris, Kenley, and the others who followed him, I think we can let Orvis be on the cover of the next issue of The Great Arcanist. The Association of Mages should vigorously support outstanding young arcanists. The Great Arcanist was the most authoritative journal of the Association of Mages. Countless magicians were proud to be on the cover. Chris readily agreed. Of course, this is very good material. As long as Orvis is willing to accept the interview, he will be on the cover of the next issue of The Great Arcanist. How could Orvis not be willing? He nodded hurriedly. I am willing, Mr. President, I am very willing to accept the interview. Then it's settled. After sending away the smug Orvis, Liszt summoned Chris and Kenley to his office. He held 2 small calabashes in his hands and said solemnly, Do you realize the value of this calabash? Chapter 1055. Can it store magic power? Chris asked. It can be used as a container for magic power, Kenley answered. Neither of them understood what Liszt was talking about. In the end, it was Liszt himself who said, The calabash can be seen as a spellcaster. Can I use it to create spells that I can cast at will? Cast spells at will? The 2 of them still could not figure it out. Liszt could only continue to explain helplessly. He had a broad field of vision, but the others did not. Can we use the gourd to create a single-use spell that can be cast by ordinary people? This was equivalent to a magic scroll. Of course, there were no magic scrolls in this world. Your Majesty, are you saying that we can cast spells through the calabash? Chris asked. Kenley also understood, but she quickly denied. The calabash is too small, and it can't store much magic power. It can only be used to cast ordinary spells, but it's not that useful. Also, it'll cost a lot of materials to carve an automatic magic circle. This isn't the biggest calabash. There should be bigger ones in the garden. Maybe they can store more magic power to cast advanced spells. Also, they don't have to be offensive spells. They can be used as a power source for mechanical devices. Liszt thought of a device and continued, If the magic bicycle is driven by the calabash, does it mean that it can run continuously? Even ordinary people can ride it? The magic bicycle and its inventor, Gundolf Truth, had been featured on the cover of Grand Arcanist before. That's a good idea. But the magic power stored in a single calabash is still too little. Then let's connect more calabashes. Connect more calabashes? Kenley was surprised. The more calabashes we connect, the more magic power we can store. Maybe it can really replace the existence of spellcasters. The next step is to use the gourd as the center and expand your thinking to develop its value, Liszt instructed when he saw that the 2 of them understood. He believed that the combination of the calabash and magic power could be seen as a kind of electricity. Maybe the calabash could bring about the age of electricity and make people's lives more convenient. Of course, compared to the ubiquitous electricity on Earth, magic power was still a luxury that only the nobles could enjoy. The reason was simple. The source of magic power could only be provided by a magician. Other than the Guild of Magic funded by Liszt, who could provide mana on a large scale, the other nobles simply could not afford to support mages, especially in this era where the magic net was shrinking. In fact, if a chi wasn't a magic shooter, Liszt wouldn't have thought about developing magic at all. No matter how rich the development of magic was, it was not as good as riding a dragon. However, since a chi had become a magic shooter, he also had to develop magic for a chi so that a chi could go to the next level. The electrical era of magic was not extravagant, as long as some convenient magic items could be developed, such as magic elevators, magic water heaters, and so on. As a dragon-rearing family, a noble family that stood at the pinnacle of luxury, Liszt naturally wanted to enjoy life. I'll tell Crazy the idea of the magic elevator later and ask her to develop it as soon as possible. It'll be best if the magic elevator can run through the entire palace when the Palace of Stars, Sun and Moon is completed. But Achi said that she's going to build a small magic transmission circle in the palace. It doesn't seem that she needs the magic elevator, right? There was no point in thinking too much. Even if he couldn't use it himself, it would be good to give it to the servants. He returned to Fire Castle, called the gourd sprite, Klein, and went to the gourd plantation to inspect it. He used to think that gourds, a crop, had no use except as a container, but now it was different. The effect of the gourd's magic storage had doubled its value. List, Ella is really annoying. It's not an elf butler, but it always likes to make noise in your ear. It's really an annoying elf. Klein complained on the way out of Fire Castle. It was fed up with the thorn sprite Ella. List chuckled. You don't have to care about it. He let Ella serve as an elf butler at the stage of the great elf, of course because of Ella's strong will, but also because he hoped that Ella could bring about a catfish effect, stimulate the elves and promote the development and evolution of the elves. Now it seemed that it was still effective. Klein was stimulated by Ella and evolved into a great elf. I don't want to pay attention to it, but it's really annoying. I play with it and it always interrupts me. I don't like it. I want to leave Fire Castle, I want to live in my gourd garden. Well, I also want to take the gourd sprite and the gourd sprite worm out. I like them. There were not many elves who liked their own kind, and Klein was obviously an exception. In its separate worm room, there were 2 gourd sprites and 7 gourd sprite worms, all of which it took the initiative to do. The 2 little elves also liked to follow behind Klein, playing pranks and causing mischief in the castle. The gourd sprites were very naughty. On the contrary, although Ella had a bad temper and a domineering personality, it rarely made mischief. If you really don't like living in Fire Castle, don't live in the plantation. After all, there are still some dangers outside. When my palace is built, there will be a large elven palace. At that time you can have your own separate garden and then you can enjoy peace. Well, I'll bear with it first. When can the palace be built? In another 6 months, I will definitely be able to move in before this year's festival. That's okay. When he came to the gourd plantation, List mainly came to inspect the growth of the gourds here and the different kinds of gourds produced. There were many kinds of gourds in the primeval forest. Some were long, some were large, some were thick, some were hard, some were soft, some had only 1 cavity and some had 3. No matter what kind of gourd it was, they all grew under the influence of Klein's worm stalk. When Magic Eyes was cast, apart from a few worm stalks, there was no mana retroaction. He went to the side of the largest gourd and picked up a large gourd, almost the size of a watermelon. I don't know if this type of gourd can store magic power. If it can, it should be able to release a high-level spell at a time, right? Unfortunately, magic power does not have a gaseous, solid, or liquid structure. There is no possibility of liquefaction. No matter how much it is compressed, a gourd cannot store much magic power. Magic power was not matter. In the wizard's triangular theory, magic power, spirit and matter were equal existences. The particularity of magic power might be similar to light, with wave-particle duality. Because magic power was a part of the weave, whether it was the magic power of the weave dragon or the magic power of dragons and other creatures, they all existed in the form of a net and a field. Suddenly, there was a burst of inspiration in his mind. Gourds can store magic, which is very unusual. According to the triangular theory, ordinary plants are ordinary matter, and it is impossible to block magic power. So what is the structure of this gourd that magic cannot penetrate it? Chapter 1056. There were many things in the world that could block magic. For example, glutinous rice juice was a very outstanding magic resistance material. Almost all large castles were built with glutinous rice juice. Such castles could resist magic and aura attacks very well, and they were very sturdy. However, glutinous rice juice was only anti-magic and could not block the penetration of magic. Basically, there were not many items that could block the penetration of magic, even gems and crystals, which were products of the dragon. The magic of gems could last for a long time, but the reason was that the gems had a condensing effect and could automatically absorb the free magic in the air. Crystals also had this effect, but it was very weak. Once the magic of the dragon was exhausted, it would lose its effect. Therefore, the ability of the gourd to store magic suddenly awakened List. He wanted to find out the hidden secret and why it could isolate the existence of magic, which was different from matter. It seems that while the Guild of Magic develops the value of the gourd, I also have to contact a Chi and let her follow up on the secret. I can also try to explore it myself. I always feel that this small gourd hides a big secret, and it is related to my opportunity. Unfortunately, the gourd was really just an ordinary gourd. After observing it over and over again, he did not find any more clues. He could only put it aside for the time being. He looked at the gourd spirit Klein, who was swinging on a rattan, and said, "Klein, you really are my little lucky star. The gourd you farm is very important. Seeing that you are not happy in Firewood Castle, why don't I teach you a song? I like singing. Klein's eyes lit up. Come learn from me. Calabash Brothers, 7 flowers on a vine. Not afraid of the wind and rain, la 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 la. Liszt sang. Klein followed suit. Calabash Brothers, 7 flowers on a vine. But halfway through the song it shouted, not good at all. Liszt, do you think I am stupid? Singing needs to rhyme, but yours doesn't rhyme at all. It's not as good as the Return to the River Castle that old Carter taught me. Listen to me. Klein was very contemptuous of Professor Liszt's songs. But it was true that Calabash Brothers was very pleasant to listen to in Chinese, but when translated into Serpentine, the rhymes were chaotic and they were stuttering. After all, these were two completely different language systems, and their aesthetic designs were as different as day and night. Soon Klein's singing voice was heard. Look how beautiful the ocean is. What a thrill. Look, this natural scenery is so intoxicating. Look, the orchard on the hillside is full of lipstick-like raspberries. Everywhere is filled with fragrance and warmth. But you said goodbye to me, abandoned your lover forever, left your hometown forever. Did you really have the heart to not come back? Don't abandon me, don't make me suffer any more. Return to the River Castle, come back. This was a very popular folk song of the Steel and Iron Ridge Kingdom. It was also very popular in the Sapphire Duchy. Basically, anyone born in Sapphire could sing this song. Butler Carter was a Sapphire person, and he taught this song to Klein and the other elves in his spare time. Klein's voice had a childish taste, like a child singing, but the Return to the River Castle was still very pleasant to the ear. Clap, 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 clap. Liszt was not stingy with his applause. Klein, you are very talented in singing. But you also need to work hard on farming. I hope that one day you can grow a gourd magic ingredient. The gourd is very important to me. You have to pay attention to it, understand? Feeling Liszt's ardent expectations, Klein nodded. Of course, I will grow a magic ingredient. I am definitely better than Ella. His resentment towards Ella did not diminish. Seeing this, Liszt could not help but shake his head. Ella, this catfish, was indeed very qualified. There were no elves in the castle who did not hate it. Even if there were a few thorn sprites, they also hate Ella. Ella would not treat the other party gently just because they were of the same species. However, when Liszt returned to Firewood Castle and inspected the sprite worm room, he found Ella standing on the window of her worm room, looking at the distant mountains in a daze. There seemed to be a touch of sadness in her mood. Ella, what are you looking at? Liszt could not help but be concerned. Although he now had so many dragons and so many elves to pay attention to, Ella still had an indescribably important position in his heart. Ella looked back at Liszt, shook the pleated collar of her small frac abier, and solemnly said, I am thinking about the future. Liszt almost laughed, but he held it back. Oh, what future are you thinking about? Evolution. Evolution? Yes, Liszt, I have matured. During my time as an elf housekeeper, I have examined my shortcomings. Although I have been recognized by old Carter, Mawson, and others in terms of management, Achi also said that I am talented and a rare elf. Ella boasted seriously and then said, but I also have to review my shortcomings, that is, I am not a dragon elf, my authority is not reflected. Especially Carly and Yadi, these two coquettish bitches, always hinder me from carrying out my orders. Carly was a man-eating tree dragon elf, and Yadi was a buckwheat dragon elf, often despising Ella. What are you going to do? Liszt nodded and asked seriously. He knew very well that Ella's intelligence could not be judged by ordinary elves. Great elves such as the giant algae elf Parker, the gourd elf Clyde, and the pea elf Ash. Although their IQ already had the IQ of a teenager, they were more of a sentimental person. They could learn knowledge but did not know why. Only dragon elves could think deeply, showing the IQ and EQ of humans. However, Ella had shown it now. In addition, there was another great elf who also showed this specialty, the mangrove elf Nami. Nami liked to wander around and work, while Ella tended to be a housekeeper of the castle. At this moment, Ella said seriously, Liszt, you said that only by liking a dragon can a great elf evolve into a dragon elf. So I decided that from now on, I will try to like a dragon. Although I don't like your dragons, I have to do it. Liszt was a little speechless. Could it be forced to like a dragon? So how do you like a dragon? More contact. Ella obviously thought about it deeply. I plan to resign as the elf housekeeper of Fire Castle and focus on getting in touch with your dragons. Fire Dragon Leo, Invisible Dragon Bard, Light Emerald Dragon Isin, Gray Iron Dragon Orn, Mountain Copper Dragon Marta, Water Dragon Walter, Aluminum Dragon Connor, and Bone Dragon Winnie. I will try to get in touch with them. Well, in that case, let's start with Bard. He didn't know if Ella's forced love would work, but it was worth a try. Ella nodded, then narrowed her eyes. Wow, I'm going to announce my resignation to the elves now. Chapter 1057. All of you come out. All elves come out, I have something important to announce. I'm talking about you, dawdling, come out quickly or I'll tear out your front teeth. Ella shouted loudly, causing the entire worm room area of the castle to be in chaos. Numerous elves and big elves flew randomly in the aisle and made a lot of noise. It was even noisier than the market in the market. Whoa! What the hell is going on? Ella is a bully. Chirp chirp chirp. Pop 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 pop. Hum hum hum. What a nasty big elf. Ella, are you going to discuss the art of binding with me? I can't stand this big elf who likes to toss and turn. Can't you just play honestly and find ways to disturb my peace all day? The buckwheat dragon elf Yadi stretched. She was reading in her worm room and didn't want to pay attention at all. As a dragon elf, and a dragon elf that migrated from the Iron Dragon Chain Palace, Yadi's heart knot may have been untied. But with Ella in the way, she was unable to integrate well into the new environment. Therefore, the identity of the elf butler did not fall on her head. Of course, she was not interested in being a butler. But this did not prevent her from looking down on Ella. How could a big elf manage a dragon elf? She wanted to ignore the annoying Ella among the elves, but she couldn't avoid it. She would see her every day. Fire Castle, with many elves and small rooms, was already at full capacity. But there were more than 20 big elves, more than 200 little elves, and more than 1,300 sprite worms living here. With so many elves, it would be terrible to encounter a bad-tempered Ella. Every time it was a trivial matter, it could be tossed around like a chicken and a dog. Today was no exception. Although Yadi did not go out of the door, she pricked up her ears and listened carefully, trying to figure out what Ella was up to. When he returned, he would be able to humiliate this loathsome fellow. Quiet. Quiet for me. I'm talking to you, what are you looking at? If you look again, I'll dig out your eyes. Ella's voice was always so energetic, and Yadi curled her lips in disdain. She thought to herself, just because she is List's first elf, she is arrogant and boundless. Sooner or later she will fall. After a long period of scolding, the aisle finally calmed down a little. It had to be said that Ella's deterrence was still good. At that moment, Yadi heard Ella shout, "Let me tell you something serious. From today onwards, I officially resign from my position as the elf butler to List." There was a moment of silence. Following that, loud cheers erupted from the walkway. Sand-jumping Karaka. Woola. Gallop, gallop, gallop. You should have resigned long ago. I see the light, the sky is bright. Chirp, chirp, chirp. Countless big elves and little elves clapped their hands and cheered excitedly, as if the serfs had turned over and become their masters. Some elves even took out jade powder and scattered it on the walkway to celebrate this beautiful moment that was worth remembering for the rest of their lives. Of course, there were also some fairies who quietly grabbed the jade powder that had fallen to the ground and happily hid it on their bodies. Among them, there was a little elf who was beside himself with joy. It flew directly in front of Ella, made a face at Ella, stuck out its tongue and said blue blue blue. However, the next moment Ella, with her hands on her waist, made the little elf fall from heaven to hell. She opened her 5 fingers, and her little pink hands swung up fiercely, and then slapped down fiercely. Thud. A crisp sound. The little elf fell from the air like a cannonball and smashed into the ground. She was in a daze and then burst into tears. The celebratory scene gradually cooled down with Ella's slap and the cry of the little elf. Ella put her hands on her waist again and loudly spat at all the elves in front of her. Wow, don't think that you can be free just because I resigned from my position as the elf butler. Remember, my resignation is only temporary and I will come back. Cherish the few moments of enjoyment now and when I come back. With a snort, Ella turned around and left a powerful word. Arrange. Her transparent wings fluttered, and she had already left the bug room area and flew out of the castle without looking back. This journey was like a boundless sea and sky, a leap of fish and a flight of birds. It was an assault towards a broader level of life. It was its persistent thinking about the future, and it was also breaking the shackles that fate had placed on itself. She left simply, leaving the elves in the aisle looking at each other. The scene that should have been celebrating was dominated and shrouded by fear at this moment. Many of them had not been in Firewood Castle for a long time, but Ella's image of a bully was deeply rooted in the hearts of the elves. From day to night, from reality to dreams, it was like a ghost wandering over the castle. Gallop, gallop, gallop. A heartless elf, after being dominated by fear for a few seconds, became heartless again. She grabbed the jade powder that she had worked hard to collect and flew back to the bug room. Like a chain reaction, the other elves returned to normal. They stared at each other, quarreled, and the atmosphere gradually returned to normal. However, they didn't know what was going on, but a few elves vaguely felt that things seemed to be changing. What is Ella going to do? The great P-elf, Ash, wrapped the rope around her wrist and thought for a moment. Without thinking about the result, she quickly put Ella behind her, returned to the bug room, picked up a scale of the gray-mouthed iron dragon on, and continued to sleep. The buckwheat dragon was also curious about why Ella quit, but it was too lazy to ask such a nasty elf, so it continued to read. Hello Bard, I am Ella, List's favorite great elf. Ella flew to Bard's ear and introduced herself loudly, trying to attract the other's attention. However, Bard just raised his eyelids, then closed them again and continued to lie on the top of the moon mountain to bask in the sun. Although List had told it to get familiar with Ella, it was not a good idea. However, the dragon had its own character. It simply looked down on little things like elves that were smaller than ants. Reluctantly showing up was already giving List face. I want to like you, Bard. You should behave well. Only then can I like you. Ella stood on Bard's eyelids and said seriously. However, the next moment, Bard didn't know where he got a handful of smoke grass, put it between his teeth and slowly rubbed and chewed. In an instant, the unique smell of smoke grass permeated the top of the moon mountain. Ella's eyes widened. 1 second. 2 seconds. 3 seconds. On the 4th second, it suddenly covered its nose and flew away while screaming, I will never fall in love with a dragon with such a stinky mouth. Never. So, Ella, you're giving up on Bard? List was inspecting the progress of the construction of the Palace of the Sun, Moon, and Stars. Listening to Ella's endless complaints, he asked helplessly. It's too smelly, List. How can you stand it? Aren't you afraid of the smell? List laughed. I'll get used to it. I can't get used to it. I want another dragon to like it. Well, then change to the mountain copper dragon Marta. It's at the back of the mountain. I'll send you there. Chapter 1058. For the time being, the mountain copper dragon Marta was quite favored by Ella. At least the dragon and the elf could get along harmoniously. It was mainly because Ella was talking to herself. Marta didn't even like to talk to List, let alone a great elf. Someone was sent to protect Ella. List didn't stay in the Fire Kingdom for long. He spent several days in the magic laboratory, looking for possible clues with a Chi, who was studying the gourd in her spare time. The gourd is very strange. Judging from the microscopic level, its structure is not unusual, but at a more microscopic level, there must be a different structure that blocks the penetration of magic. Brother, a Chi can't sense the more microscopic level for the time being. She needs some equipment. If you need any equipment or resources, just tell me. List simply said. He was a little anxious. The smoke mission had been delayed in the stronghold for more than half a year. Every day he looked at the unchanging smoke serpentines. Mission: 202 choices of fate, guidance and prediction. You have grown from a small rural lord to the king of a country. In the time when the Fire Kingdom is about to be established, perhaps it is time to think more deeply about some issues. Please touch the stronghold. Reward: the favor of fate. His heart gradually became irritated. Originally, the kind of smoke mission that happened once every few days or weeks was really refreshing. He often felt the benefits brought by the power of fate, but it also made him seriously dependent on it. Now, he hadn't received any reward from the smoke mission for more than half a year. His heart felt like it was being scratched by a cat and he always felt uncomfortable. This was probably the case of it being easy to go from frugality to extravagance, but difficult to go from extravagance to frugality. When there were no smoke missions, life could go on as usual without any discomfort. But now that he was used to the smoke missions, he would be very unhappy if he didn't get any benefits. However, he also understood that it was not a good thing to rely too much on the smoke missions. The delay in this stronghold mission might be a good time to get rid of this dependence. He still had a very clear understanding of this. The smoke missions are the embodiment of the power of fate in me. It is a kind of talent of mine and I am not wrong to rely on it. I just need to develop in a comprehensive way. I can't rely too much on the smoke missions. There must be a limit to everything. In short, Previously, the smoke missions were too frequent. Now that the smoke missions were taking too long, it was best to neutralize them. There were all kinds of gourds of various sizes on Achi's laboratory table. She took out a document and said, Achi has begun to design a device that can observe the structure of matter at a more microscopic level. My brother once said that the combination of convex and concave lenses can form a telescope or a microscope. That's right, I told you. When Achi was studying astronomy, she was already good at developing telescopes. She made many telescopes of various specifications, but she rarely tried to develop microscopes. She had always relied on her subtle perception of magic power. Now that she can't sense it, it's a good time to develop microscopes. Liszt sighed in his heart that Achi was becoming more and more powerful. At the same time, a trace of doubt flashed in his mind. With your sensing ability, I'm afraid that the degree of subtlety you can sense can reach the atomic level. If that's the case, the precision of the microscope you'll need to reach a higher level. He didn't know much about microscopes, but he seemed to remember that he had learned about microscopes in middle school. His teacher had told him that optical microscopes could only magnify objects by more than 1,000 times. Those atomic-level substances were all seen with an electron microscope. As for smaller electrons, nuclei, and the like, Liszt didn't know what kind of microscope was used to see them. He also couldn't understand whether scientists really saw electrons or if they measured them using scientific methods. If the precision of microscopes isn't enough, Achi will develop a magic microscope. A magic microscope? Yes, didn't my brother say that magic power is similar to light and has wave-particle duality? Since an optical microscope can magnify and observe matter, a magic microscope should also be able to magnify and observe matter. Perhaps with a magic microscope, Achi can extend her perception to a more microscopic level. All right. Liszt had to admit that he really couldn't keep up with Achi's train of thought, and he really couldn't understand how magic power could be made into a telescope. In fact, he knew the principle of an optical microscope at best. He didn't even know the principle of an electron microscope, let alone the magic microscope that Achi was now conceiving. So he simply responded, as long as you have an idea. Waving his hand, he turned around and left gracefully. The theory of the magic isolation of the gourd was handed over to Achi to study, and Liszt immediately focused on the construction of the territory. When April was about to arrive, the development committee finished the spring plowing work and organized a territorial planning of Blazing Island according to Liszt's will. The territorial planning was Liszt's idea of the development of the territory, and it was based on the administrative divisions on Earth. Liszt, after a comprehensive consideration, the committee divided the Blazing Island into 21 territories, and each territory is basically equal in size. Of course, the northwest half of the territory is more desolate, and the area is relatively larger. The southeast half of the territory is more fertile and can support more people, and the area is relatively smaller. In the administrative office, Lee William instructed the clerks to hang a meticulously drawn map on the wall. With the sextant to measure latitude and longitude, and the World of Warcraft as a mount to look down from the sky, drawing a map was a relatively easy task for the Blazing Kingdom. This topographic map of Blazing Island was accurate down to the mountains, rivers, every road, and every castle. Other than this kind of map, there was also the topographic map of contour lines that Liszt had pointed out. The committee was even preparing to create a huge sand table and place it in the Palace of Stars, replicating the entire Blazing Island, and even the entire northeast corner of the legendary continent. There was a map on the wall. The Blazing Territory was divided into 21 territories, which were equivalent to the provincial units. Of course, most of the territories were simply divided, and the location of the territory's central city was specified. They had not really been developed. Currently, the Blazing Island had basically absorbed all the Moonkill natives, and only a small number of native tribes were still hidden in the deeper primitive forests. Liszt's gaze swept across the territory. Currently, there were roughly 9 territories that had been developed and named. Reed Territory, Central City Reed City, Whirlpool Mountain Territory, Central City Firewood City, Whirlpool Estuary Territory, Central City Estuary City, Dragon Pit Mine Territory, Central City Dragon Valley City, Jade Mountain Territory, Central City Jade City, Mermaid Territory, Central City Mermaid City, King Territory, Central City Fire King City, Sea Reef Territory, Central City Reef City, Endless Volcano Territory, Central City Phoenix City. Among them, the Mermaid Territory was basically in the sea, and so was the Mermaid City. There was no land territory. The Endless Volcano Territory was on the other side of the Endless Volcano Range, and the Phoenix City was built on the edge of the Phoenix sycamore forest. Currently it was only the size of a small town. After the territory is planned, the construction of the roads must also keep up. Although the teleportation portal will play a main role in the future, normal roads also need to be built. If the teleportation portal is too busy, the burden on the teleportation portal will be too heavy, and it will easily collapse. Therefore, in this aspect of planning, I still need to trouble you, Father. Don't worry, although you have already established your own blazing family, you are still my son. My feelings for this country are linked to you. Yes, the blazing family and the tulip family are just names. Our bloodlines are linked together. Immediately, the father and son looked at each other and smiled. Everything was understood without words. Chapter 1059. Liszt had underestimated Achi's efficiency. While he was busy inspecting the construction of the territory, Achi had already created the theoretical magic microscope in just a month. Sir Achilles' Ides provided the design, and I led a group of outstanding great mages to work day and night on it. After repeated polishing, we finally completed a magic microscope that can be used by magic shooters, Laird Truth excitedly introduced. During his stay in the Fire Kingdom, he had quickly integrated into the Guild of Magic. The high-end magic experiments conducted by Achi were all eye-openers for him. He felt that the truth he had come into contact with before was simply superficial. This was the true Holy Land of Truth. Although they were both magic shooters, his respect for Achi had reached the level of calling himself his disciple. It had to be said that the knowledge from Earth that Liszt had explained to Achi might be slightly different from this world, but it had greatly broadened her horizons. It allowed her to stand at a higher level and examine the meaning of magic. It also meant that she was closer to the truth. That was why her research topic was so shocking and mesmerizing to Laird. Laird organized his knowledge and made up for a large amount of magic foundation for Achi. Now, Achi not only had profound basic knowledge but also had great foresight. Her magic attainments definitely surpassed those of the magic shooters of the Moon Empire and Sun Empire in ancient times. The magic telescope, which was very complicated for Liszt, only took Achi a few days to come up with a complete idea. Laird and other mages who had many years of experience in making magic equipment would then operate it. The magic telescope quickly appeared in front of Liszt. It was a huge metal device that was 3 meters tall. It was engraved with dense magic runes and embedded with several sets of complex magic formations. Although the magic power represented by low, high, and supreme magic comes from the same source, the microscopic particle movement is completely different. Ordinary mages can only communicate with low magic power and cannot use the magic telescope. Only magic shooters with high magic power can barely use it. When Sir Achilles rides the unicorn, his magic power will reach supreme magic power and he will be able to use the magic telescope perfectly. As Laird explained, he couldn't help but glance at Charlie the unicorn. This unbelievably beautiful unicorn was truly an enviable existence, especially when paired with a mage. They complemented each other very well. Big brother, Achi has already used a magic telescope to observe the minute structure of the gourd. Achi was about to explain in detail when she suddenly noticed that Arwell D and the others were still around. She then ordered without holding back, "Sir Arud, please leave the laboratory for now." "As you wish." Laird was not angry. He bowed slightly and left the laboratory with the other great magicians. In the Guild of Magic, Achi's position was unique. After they left and closed the door of the lab, Achi said, "The detailed structure of the calabash is very interesting. Brother, guess what came to my mind when I saw this structure?" She had a faint smile on her face. Only when she was with Liszt would she reveal her innocence. "Weave? No. Dragon? Not really. Then I can't guess." Liszt expressed his helplessness. Achi smiled and said, "Let me give you a hint, mermaids?" Mermaids? Liszt tried his best to think, but he couldn't figure out what mermaids were related to. In the end he made a random guess. "Did you think of the devil?" "No, brother, it's the sea." "Sea?" Yes, Achi can't feel any difference on the atomic level of the calabash. But on a more subtle level it's like the sea, constantly surging. When magic comes into contact with the sea, it will be blocked by the sea. On the other hand, the subtle level of ordinary matter is not like the sea but like a layer of stone. Magic can easily pass through it. Achi described the scene she saw through the magic telescope. She could imagine the observed matter as a filter. Some filter nets were built with large stones, and magic could easily pass through them. Some filter nets were built with gravel, and magic could also easily pass through them. Some filter nets were built with fine sand, and the penetration of magic was slightly slower. Some filter nets were built with even finer dust and most of the magic was blocked. On the other hand, the filter net of the calabash was made with seawater, and there was almost no gap for magic to pass through. After understanding what Achi said, List couldn't help but frown. So, Achi, do you think the structure of the seawater in the calabash has anything to do with the barrier? He didn't care what the calabash looked like. What he cared about was the information about the barrier. Brother, Achi has made a general judgment about the barrier after half a year of research, Achi said seriously. The barrier is the boundary between matter, spirit, and magic. Let's take the invisible dragon Bard as an example. Its barrier is obviously the barrier of matter. Then Achi analyzed Bard's situation in detail. Bard could pass through matter, the boundary of matter, and the world beyond matter. On the surface, it seemed to be an act of breaking the barrier, but in reality it was not. Bard's ability didn't exceed the limit of the barrier of matter. The real barrier of matter is not the tearing of the boundary of matter or the transformation of stone into gold, but another level. Like the weave dragon, it doesn't tear the boundary like Bard, but it itself is enough to pass through matter and exist simultaneously in the world beyond matter, the boundary of matter, and the world beyond matter. This analysis made List thoughtful. Achi continued to analyze. Let's talk about the subtle level of the calabash. The seawater-like structure can block the penetration of magic. From Achi's point of view, it doesn't reveal the barrier of matter, but the barrier of magic. At least it's magic that can penetrate this barrier. When magic can penetrate the calabash, it means that the barrier in this aspect has been broken. List asked, if this is the barrier of magic, does that mean that if I train with Leo, we should follow this train of thought to mold magic to penetrate the barrier represented by the calabash? That's the general idea, but Achi hasn't thought about the specific training details. Brother, don't be anxious. Achi still needs to refer to more clues and finally crack the real secret of the barrier. Although I'm anxious, I can endure it. List gave Achi a reassuring look. I'm now standing at the peak of power in this world, and I'm only 22 years old this year. There's still a lot of time left for me. Achi, we both have a long life ahead of us. I'm not anxious and you don't have to be either. Yes. Achi nodded vigorously. List did his best to coil her beautiful blue hair. Although the smoke mission was like a fishbone stuck in his throat, he could only treat it as overcoming his dependence on the smoke mission. Perhaps after overcoming it he could see more clearly what the power of fate was. Suddenly, a light flashed in his mind. Perhaps the blessing of fate, reward of the smoke mission is to let me understand the power of fate and think about the power of fate? It was unknown. But his mind had quickly calmed down. How many Dragon Knight had not broken through the barrier since ancient times? Even if he couldn't complete this smoke mission, his life had not been in vain. Now was the right time to devote all his energy to the construction of the kingdom and lay a solid foundation. Chapter 1060. Touching the barrier still needed to wait. Time flashed by like a white steed flashing past a crevice. Sapphire calendar year 157, Duke Skola Cornflower of Snow Wind Mountain passed away. Before his death, Duke Skola announced that his title would be inherited by the second prince, Spike Carter Cornflower. The eldest prince, Spike Cornflower, immediately rebelled and claimed that the second prince, Scott Cornflower, had killed his father, so the title of Duke belonged to him. So the two sons of the late Duke each claimed that they were the new Dukes of Snow Wind Mountain and applied to the Cornflower Gemstone Dragon of Snow Wind Mountain for arbitration. The Cornflower Gemstone Dragon did not care about the fight between the two brothers. Then the eldest prince asked for help from the Yellowstone Kingdom, and the second prince asked for help from Yevich Waterpeanut, asking for help from the Eagle Kingdom. Snow Wind Mountain fell into a civil war, and a large number of civilians were secretly transported to Adamantine City by the mercenary group organized by Yevich to stay in the Fire Kingdom. The arrival of the civilians of Snow Wind Mountain was a powerful supplement to the population structure of the Fire Kingdom. So, List instructed Yevich, make sure the civil war in Snow Wind Mountain continues for 3 to 5 years, and continue to migrate people to our Fire Kingdom. Your Majesty, please rest assured, everything is under control. Yevich, who was already riding a high-level dragon beast, Pegasus, said confidently. As long as you complete this mission, you will be the new Marquis of the Fire Kingdom when you return. List promised benefits. He liked to use benefits to drive his followers. The Pegasus from before was a reward for Yevich's years of work in Snow Wind Mountain. After the migration was completed, he would be conferred the title of Marquis. This former member of the Dragon Knight program, after a long time, had become a perfect Sky Knight. He was worth putting in an important position. "I will not disappoint your majesty." Yevich was in high spirits. He had already married the daughter of a local marquis in Snow Wind Mountain. His career and love were both successful, and he felt that his life had reached its peak. It was also with the help of this marquis that he could be like a fish in water in Snow Wind Mountain. And under his recommendation, the marquis had already become List's follower and defected to the Fire Kingdom. All these plans were carried out in secret by the development committee. List only showed up and had lunch with the marquis. In June year 157 of the Sapphire calendar, after spending 2 months with the mountain copper dragon Marta, the thorny sprite Ella finally could not take it anymore and complained to List. "Marta is a stupid dragon. All he does is eat, drink and sleep every day. He's just like a pig in a pig farm. He should be slaughtered and eaten." "What's wrong? You don't like Marta?" List asked with a smile. Ella pinched her waist, her cheeks bulging with anger. "I will never like this stupid dragon." Wow. This sentence seemed familiar. 2 months ago, it also described the invisible dragon Bard in this way. Now, it seemed that even if Ella bit the bullet, it was not fated with the orichalcum and the invisible dragon. "Then I'll take you to Aluminum Dragon Connor. Marta and Connor's dragon nest are not far from each other, so you don't have to move again. When you come into contact with Connor, take the time to open up the Thorns plantation, and then choose a worm room in the Palace of the Sun, Moon and Stars." Fire City was a big agricultural city, and a lot of plantations had been opened up. However, with List about to move into the Palace of the Sun, Moon and Stars, some plantations would also be relocated, including the Thorns plantation. The soil near the Fire King city was more suitable for shrub plants like thorns. "I know Connor, I've seen him. He's a little ugly." Ella had not even started to get in touch with Connor, and it was already a little disgusted with Aluminum Dragon Connor. This made List not expect it to like Connor. He felt that Ella had not reached the edge of evolution at all, and it was just its personality that was mischievous. However, List was willing to let it do its mischievous thing. What if it evolved? One must know that thorns had auxiliary potions, and the value of thorns was far higher than ordinary potions. The Guild of Magic had recently graded the potions. The lowest level was the ordinary chaotic potion, referred to as the hybrid potion. This type of potion was an ordinary potion that could be used by all night, and the effect was average. The next level was the ordinary single-type potion, referred to as the single common potion. This type of potion was divided according to the magic attribute. It had a good effect on the knight with the same combat attribute, but it had no good effect on the knight with different combat attributes. The next level was the ordinary specific type potion, referred to as the top potion. This type of potion was actually the single common potion, but it was limited to 2 categories of light and dark attributes. It was because these 2 types of potions were rare and relatively more valuable. Whether it was single common potion or top potion, they could be called separately, such as water common potion, fire common potion, light common potion. Above top potion was the strong potion, referred to as the strong potion. For example, the platinum potion of the rose and white rose family was the strong potion, and the effect of the knight was very strong. Above the strong potion was the auxiliary potion, referred to as the auxiliary potion. Above the auxiliary potion was the dragon potion, referred to as the dragon potion. The dragon potion did not have much effect on the human knight, but it was of great benefit to the dragon. For example, the red dragon water of the rose and white rose family and the fire dragon water of the flame family were all dragon potions. Mixed common potion, single common potion, extra common potion, strong potion, auxiliary potion, dragon potion, these were the 6 levels of potions. Subdivided, strong potion can also be divided into strong common potion, single common potion, extra common potion. The dragon potion could also be divided in this way, but it was not necessary because strong potions and dragon potions were too rare. In August 157 of the Sapphire calendar, the underground of the Fire Kingdom was fully equipped with magic light bulbs. After the underground was lit, it meant that the city was running smoothly. So the development committee organized the first batch of immigrants. These immigrants were well-behaved civilians from major cities. They would become glorious residents of the Fire Kingdom. In addition to the civilians, there were also the knight sequences of the Burning Legion that moved to live in the Fire Kingdom. For the time being, the Burning Legion had 5 sequences: Orders of Chivalry, riding the shovel-toothed giant elephant; Orders of Chivalry, Cardinal Squad, riding the cardinal; Burning Orders of Chivalry riding the Black Blood Horse, Blizzard Orders of Chivalry riding the Blizzard Beast, and Pegasus Orders of Chivalry riding the Pegasus. Of course, the various sequences had not yet been developed, and the number of members was very small. After the Fire Kingdom officially began to operate, the surrounding supporting facilities also began to gradually operate, and the most important Sun, Moon, and Stars Palace quickly completed the main project. Mr. Carter personally led a large number of servants from Firewood Castle to the Sun, Moon, and Stars Palace to preside over the interior decoration of the palace. As for the wonders around the palace, it had been handed over to a Chi, who would personally design and supervise the construction. A flying moat, a vertical elevator, a small magic gate, an aerial park, an artificial sun, moon, and stars, a colorful crystal cover, a dragon sculpture of equal proportions, an eternal torch, an endless cumulonimbus cloud. The Chi had a lot of ideas. The resources needed to build these wonders would be astronomical. Therefore, Liszt put forward his own suggestion. Chi, why don't we build the dragon sculptures and vertical elevators of equal proportions first, and the other facilities can be built slowly later when there is time. Chi was a little unwilling. But she still nodded understandingly. Chi will listen to brother. So, Liszt quietly reached out to wipe the cold sweat on his forehead and breathed a sigh of relief. The landlord did not have any surplus food. Please remember the domain name of this book. 9 Heavens Divine Emperor Mobile Version Website. Chapter 1061. Sapphire Calendar Year 157 September. The new season's development order was being presided over by the Development Committee. Liszt was bored at Flame Island, so he went to Fertile Land for a stroll. This was the place where Nimir the lion lived. He hadn't found any traces of this legendary wyvern several times before, so he had always been unwilling to give up. Now that he was back, he wanted to try his luck and see if he could run into Nimir the lion. Even if he couldn't, he could still pick up some elves. In this season, the elves that should be bred had basically all matured. Riding on the invisible dragon Bard and activating Crystal White Track, the mana of the entire Fertile Land was arranged in an orderly manner in his special vision and highlighted. However, the light of the elves' mana retroaction was very weak and easily covered by the light of World of Warcraft's mana retroaction. Most of the light he saw along the way was emitted by World of Warcraft. Nourished by mana, World of Warcraft's meat was very nutritious, but it might not taste better than the meat of livestock raised by humans. In particular, the higher the level of World of Warcraft, the harder the meat was to taste. Looks like this trip was wasted again. I didn't pick up anything. Bard, let's go back. After 2 rounds of Fertile Land, Liszt helplessly prepared to return. Bard suddenly screamed, "Wuxia!" He discovered something unusual on the ground in the distance and told Liszt through the mind as one that there were ripples in the space on the ground. There must be something special there. As he grew older, relying on the red dragon water and large amounts of potions, Bard developed extremely fast, and his abilities became stronger and stronger. Although he was only over 80 years old, he was not far from adulthood. The Holy Dragon's powerful spatial talent made his observation skills more and more outstanding. Oh, then what are we waiting for? Let's go and take a look. He flapped his wings. Like a flashing arrow. In the blink of an eye, the man and dragon arrived at the place where Bard discovered something unusual and searched around. This was a lush forest with a thick layer of rotten leaves on the ground. There was no light of mana retroaction around, and it looked like an ordinary slope in the forest. However, Liszt and Bard were connected as one. Since Bard had discovered the anomaly, Liszt naturally discovered it as well. He would not ignore it easily. It should be here. The flow of magic in the air has caused ripples in the space. There must be something unusual buried underneath. Could it be the giant lion Nimia? A smile appeared at the corner of his mouth, and the blue skull pattern on his face was flashing. With a gentle call, the blue skull pattern broke out of his body and turned into a dragon made of bones. "Winnie, please. You don't have to be so courteous, Your Majesty. This is what I should do." Bone Dragon Winnie shook her forelimbs and stabbed them into the layer of rotten leaves on the ground. Like a super large, super fast excavator, Bone Dragon Winnie kept waving its front limbs, digging away a large amount of mud. At this moment, the layer of rotten leaves suddenly burst open, and a huge creature suddenly jumped out from the mud pit and let out a mighty roar. This figure was like a small mountain. As it roared, it had already brandished its huge claws and slapped at the Bone Dragon Winnie. "Come back, Winnie," Liszt called out. Bone Dragon Winnie instantly transformed into her magic form and projected onto Liszt's body. Their minds were connected, and they transformed into a set of bone dragon armor and a bone dragon sword. Bard flapped his wings and flew high into the sky. Wearing the bone dragon armor, List coldly stared at the huge creature that jumped out from the sky. It had the appearance of a lion, but its mountain-like size was something that no lion in World of Warcraft could achieve. It could almost compete with Dragon One. It did not have a mane, but its fur was thick as if it was wearing a layer of fur coat. Its forelimbs were thick and strong, and its head was big and its tail was short, making its body seem somewhat bloated. Roar! This huge lion raised its head and glared at the invisible dragon in the sky. Its pair of green eyes flickered with a chilling and callous light. As expected of giant lion Nimia. It's similar to Piero's description. It should be a super dragon of the earth element. After all, it likes to live underground. But its size is really too big. It's already bigger than the lightning dragon turtle, and the density of its magic power is also off the charts. List even felt that giant lion Nimia's magic power might very well belong to the category of super magic. Let's test it out first. As the Holy Dragon Knight, List would not be afraid. He swapped the Bone Dragon Sword for the Thunder Fury Dragon Spear and directly used Snow Mountain Collapse to descend from the sky. The invisible dragon that walked on the material boundary seemed to flash toward giant lion Nimia. The Thunder Fury wrapped in majestic dragon fighting energy stabbed directly in front of giant lion Nimia. At this moment, giant lion Nimia actually jumped high and dodged this attack with agility that was disproportionate to its size. Sonic boom. List's first attack missed, so he followed up with another. His attacks were like a tidal wave. Giant lion Nimia did not retreat. Instead, it leaped and pounced forward, clashing head-on with the holy dragon. But its movements were agile, but the invisible dragon was even more agile. It twisted its body and dodged the attack. Then, cooperating with List, it thrust the dragon spear forward. The tip of the spear did not stab the aiming eye but the other's back. Roar! Giant lion Nimia let out an angry roar. The dragon spear stabbed into its back like iron wire stabbing into cowhide. It felt a huge stagnation and obstruction resisting the power of the spear tip. But in the end, giant lion Nimia's skin did not successfully resist the dragon spear's piercing, and a small hole was forcefully opened in its back. Bright red blood gushed out, making it even angrier. Its green eyes turned red. It's a bit prickly. This is indeed the super magic level of earth element magic. List's gaze lingered on the small wounds on giant lion Nimia's body that were starting to recover. He had already obtained a lot of data. Giant lion Nimia has already surpassed the level of super dragons. It might be in existence on the same level as the phoenix and unicorn. Being on the same level as the phoenix and unicorn meant that it had already reached the same level as dragons. The short exchange just now also proved this point. Being able to not suffer any injuries under the powerful attack of the invisible dragon knight was enough to prove its strength. Giant lion Nimia is so powerful, which means that its skin is really valuable. If it is made into magic equipment, it might be able to resist the attack of the dragon knight. I can't miss such a treasure. Leo, come out, let's do something big together and slaughter this arrogant giant lion Nimia. Brr. The fire dragon pattern on its chest lit up and turned into a ball of flames that soared into the sky. Countless sparks scattered, and Leo's huge black and red figure slowly appeared. Almost as soon as it recovered its body of flesh and blood, it charged towards giant lion Nimia and clashed head-on with giant lion Nimia. Its front claws ruthlessly tore giant lion Nimia's skin, causing blood to spurt out violently. Giant lion Nimia also bit Leo's shoulder blade. A few black and red scales cracked. What flowed out of Leo was not blood but red flames. Shadow. List rode the invisible dragon Bard and escaped into the material boundary. When he reappeared, it was already when giant lion Nimia's abdomen was wide open. The fury of thunder fiercely stabbed into what should have been a soft abdomen. However, what surprised List was that the skin on giant lion Nimia's abdomen gave him the same feeling as if iron wires were piercing into cowhide. The stagnation force was so great that it was simply unimaginable. No wonder it's called the unkillable giant lion Nimia. With the thickness of its skin, even the dragon knight would have to stab it 30 to 50 times. List lamented, but the killing intent in his heart was becoming more and more exuberant. Unfortunately, no matter how thick your skin is, you're just a target to be beaten. Tomorrow I'm going to wear your skin. Through the spirit and soul connection, the invisible dragon Bard and the fire dragon Leo responded to List's will at the same time. Wuxia. Roar. Chapter 1062. The battle was not as evenly matched as imagined, or it could be said that the giant lion Nimia was not as strong as imagined. Its methods of battle were pouncing, biting, tearing, and pulling. Occasionally, it would use earth magic such as earth tremors. However, its skin was really too thick. Dragon's sharp teeth and claws could only cause minor injuries. Even though List controlled Bart to become one with the dragon and unleashed the powerful dragon battle aura, he still couldn't deal too much damage to the giant lion Nimia. After a full 10 minutes of battle, although giant lion Nimir was covered in blood, he was still full of energy and showed no signs of exhaustion. He's really tough. List clenched his teeth and continued to command the fire dragon Leo to fight the giant lion Nimia while he controlled the invisible dragon Bard to roam around the periphery and launch sneak attacks. He wanted to see if he could find the enemy's vital points and kill it in one strike. However, the giant lion Nimia did not have any vital points on its body. Even his chrysanthemum had been pierced twice by List. Apart from the large amount of blood loss, there were no other unexpected effects. Piercing its eyes, its eyelids quickly drooped. Instantly, as if piercing steel, only a white mark was left. When it opened its mouth to roar, List tried to stab it through its mouth, but the giant lion Nimia quickly closed its teeth and almost bit off Thunder's fury. Looks like you really don't have any vital points. If that's the case, I'll torture you to death even if I have to. The battle heated up for a full 20 minutes. Indeed, none of the attacks managed to seriously injure Nimia. However, the small wounds stacked on top of each other, and even the same wound was stabbed several times, still caused Nimia's aura to weaken. His supreme mana was lost too much blood. If they continued to grind on for a while longer, the giant lion Nimia would die in front of them. All of a sudden, the mountain-like creature sank heavily into the ground, fusing with the earth at a speed visible to the naked eye. A spell that can merge with the earth? Trying to run? Although he didn't know what kind of magic it was, it didn't stop List from interrupting Nimir's escape. They communicated in their hearts. The fire dragon Leo stomped his feet heavily, and abundant dragon magic surged toward the ground. The powerful fire magic quickly broke the balance of the giant lion Nimia's magic. At this moment, the behemoth bounced back from the ground as if it had a spring installed on it. He was also splashed with mud. It twisted its body and sank into the ground again, but with another stomp of Leo's foot, it bounced back again. After repeating this a few times, the giant lion Nimia finally understood that he had nowhere to run. It couldn't run fast on the ground and it couldn't use the escape spell Burrow. He could only wait for his death. Bard, come again. This time take its life. Holding the dragon spear tightly, dragon do chi and dragon magic mixed and violently poured into the dragon spear. However, the next moment, the giant lion, Nimia, suddenly lowered its head and lay on the ground, allowing Leo to hit it. It did not resist at all. List didn't know what was going on, but when he heard it, he suddenly realized that this earth elemental supreme magical creature was submitting to him and begging for mercy. It was a very strange kind of communication. It was not a spiritual communication, nor was it an illusion. There seemed to be a strong emotional appeal in his voice. Submit to me? List was stunned. He hadn't considered this option at all. Because his impression of the giant lion Nimia was that it had thick skin and couldn't be killed, he wanted to try to kill this legendary dragon from the beginning. Moreover, he coveted the skin of the giant lion Nimia. This kind of skin could even block the attack of a dragon. It was definitely a super armor material. With the size of the giant lion Nimia, it was definitely not a problem to use the skin to arm a few orders of chivalry. Wearing the lion skin armor, orders of chivalry was absolutely invincible. However, after getting the attitude of the giant lion Nimia, he quickly changed his mind. No, just a piece of lion skin, how can it be as cool as taming a dragon as a mount? This giant lion Nimia was not a super dragon but a real dragon the same level as the phoenix and unicorn. Of course, it was not as magical as the phoenix and unicorn. Its only characteristic was that it could take a beating. You really want to submit to me? List asked while keeping his guard up. He was not sure if the giant lion Nimia could understand his words. However, the giant lion Nimia quickly let out a woo-woo sound, conveying its meaning to List. It was really willing to submit because List had the ability to kill it. It's good that you can understand me. Then, after you submit to me, how can I guarantee that you won't betray me? Woo-woo. The giant lion Nimia expressed that it was a proud, undying giant beast Nimia. Once it submitted, it would not betray him. Moreover, it was willing to protect List as long as List provided it with food. List believed it. The powerful World of Warcraft dragons, and others all had unquestionable arrogance. They rarely had that kind of cunning character that went back on their words. Even if it was an evil dragon, once the battle of the soul was successful, it would obediently cooperate with the dragon knight. As long as the evil thoughts of the evil dragon could be killed in time, the evil dragon would still be arrogant and would not betray him. Very well, I accept your submission. Roar. The giant lion Nimia stood up and glanced at the fire dragon Leo, who was glaring at it like a tiger watching its prey, and the invisible dragon barred under List. Then it turned its head and licked the wounds on its body. With the nourishment of its saliva, the wounds that were still oozing blood quickly recovered. It shook its fur, and the blood that had formed scabs immediately fell off, returning to its previous orange color. However, its entire mental state was still a little sluggish. Although it was not seriously injured in the battle, its mental state was greatly depleted. Since you have already submitted to me, your name can still be Nimia. However, you need to leave the land of fertility and return to my territory, Flame Island, with me. I need you to guard my capital as its guardian beast. List temporarily arranged for the giant lion Nimia to be a watchdog. To be honest, the giant lion Nimia was not very useful. Perhaps with its attainments in earth magic, it could level the land or something. However, it was more of a symbol. Although the status of a subdragon in the legends was not as high as that of a dragon, it was still a kind of glory. It would be a pearl that adorned List's crown. The giant lion Nimia nodded like a human and followed behind the invisible dragon, galloping toward Realgar City. Its speed was not fast enough, but this was only relative to a dragon. For a normal World of Warcraft, its running speed was already very fast. They traveled during the day and rested at night. After a whole week, they finally arrived at Realgar City. Its hill-like body made the knights of Realgar City nervous from afar. Fortunately, List had already informed the territory, so there were no misunderstandings. Standing on Nimia's head, List's silver shining armor was especially bright, and the scarlet cape on his back gave off a strong gust of wind. His appearance was extremely eye-catching. The knights and civilians who built Realgar City stopped what they were doing and looked up at the giant lion Nimia. What is that? What a big lion. His Majesty's glory. Giant lion Nimia, the legendary giant lion Nimia, a subdragon. A subdragon is nothing. His Majesty has so many dragons, lifting a giant lion is a piece of cake. This is His Majesty List. Great! Amidst the exclamations of the subjects, List rode on the giant lion Nimia and stepped into the magic gate of Realgar City, leaving only the aftermath of the earthquake. That inconceivably imposing figure was destined to become the central topic of conversation for a very long time in the Realgar City's residents' leisure time. Chapter 1063. Nimia's residence in the Fire King's city caused a huge commotion. However, the commotion came and went quickly. After all, the residents of the Fire King's city could often see dragons flying in the sky. Compared to dragons, the reputation of the giant lion Nimia was still a lot weaker, even though its size did not lose to that of a dragon, and it was a subdragon on the same level as the unicorn and the phoenix. After abandoning the subdragon title, List recently picked it up again and made it a separate level. He originally thought that the subdragon was a false rumor about the super dragon, but it turned out that it was not. It was just that people confused the subdragon with the super dragon. The subdragon was very rare, and the super dragon was also very rare, so it was understandable that they were mixed up. Nimia, what do you think about the nest? Since he had already subdued it, List was willing to respect Nimia's opinion. Roar. Nimia expressed that he liked soft soil, which was convenient for him to use magic to move his body underground. As an earth element super magic creature, he could completely blend into the soil just like how phoenixes could blend into magma and flames. That was a special form of magic. Is the soil around the Fire King's city not soft enough? Obviously not enough. Then you can search around here yourself. In the end, Nimia chose a forest adjacent to the Pegasus farm, about 40 kilometers away from the Fire King's city. According to List's instructions, he often went to the Fire King's city, circled around the Sun Mountain and Moon Mountain, and then enjoyed the delicious food prepared for him at the foot of the Sun Mountain. Compared to raising a dragon, raising Nimia was much easier. He only needed to provide a large amount of meat, and there was no need to provide magic potions for him to grow. Of course, one meal would eat about 1 orders of chivalry's rations for a month. His Majesty actually caught Nimia and tamed it as the guardian beast of the Fire King's city. This is really incredible. When Duke Piero came to the Fire King's city to choose his own ducal residence, he saw this familiar subdragon and was filled with endless emotions. Back then he gathered a huge amount of manpower and materials to cooperate with Grey-mouthed Iron Dragon Orn to capture Nimia. However, he repeatedly returned empty-handed, wasting resources for nothing. In the end, he told List about the giant lion Nimia as part of the deal. He had a malicious thought in his heart. He hoped that List would also be part of the operation, wasting resources for nothing. It would be best if he ended up in a sorry state. In the end, comparisons were odious. He couldn't even seriously injure Nimia, but List could tame Nimia. Maybe this is why I became a duke who lost my dukedom, while List became a rising legend in the legendary continent. There is a huge gap between us. For the first time, Piero's confidence in restoring the Grey Iron Dukedom was greatly shaken. List didn't know what Piero was thinking. At his current position, he didn't need to care about what others thought. He said calmly, "The great lion Nimia is only a sky dragon. Lowering its head and submitting to me is its smart choice. Otherwise, the so-called unkillable legend would have been shattered. It's quite a pity. Originally, I planned to use the lion's skin to customize a batch of standard leather armor for the Burning Legion." Piero opened his mouth but did not reply. October 157 of the Sapphire Calendar. The Burning Legion, who didn't wear the standard leather armor of the lion's skin, also disguised as the Sapphire Orders of Chivalry and participated in the annual Expansion Order War. The Eagle Kingdom still pursued the strategy of not resisting and let the flies of Sapphire plunder everywhere. However, when the 2-month war ended and the harvest was counted, List was very dissatisfied. The low-level knight and serf population had a lot of harvest, but the resources of the nobles and elves were very little. Adonis has learned to be smart. He moved the big and small nobles in the hinterland of the coastal area to the inland area in advance and redivided the fiefs. This is like a lizard cutting off its tail and giving up the fertile coastal area. To be able to be so decisive, it seems that I have to look up to him. It took great courage to formulate such a humiliating strategy. No matter what strategic intention Adonis Moonlight Silver had, he had lost the noble quality of fearlessness as a knight. This also meant that he had lost the people's heart. The low-level knight who were forced to migrate under the Expansion Order War had basically understood that they had been abandoned, so they happily joined the Fire Kingdom without the slightest resistance. They were even glad that they could catch such an opportunity to become a member of the Fire Kingdom. This year's Expansion Order War was indeed a good opportunity. This was probably the last Expansion Order War carried out in the name of the Sapphire Duchy, and also the last opportunity for the captured knight to become a member of the kingdom. Because List had already notified the 3 kingdoms and many duchies in the northeast corner of the legendary continent in advance. The Fire Kingdom would be officially founded on January 1st, 158 of the Sapphire Calendar, and the Flame Calendar would be launched, setting this day as the first month of the first year of the Flame Calendar. On this day of 3 months he would be officially crowned as the king. The era of the Fire Kingdom was coming. Is this day finally coming? Anthony Sapphire stood on the highest corridor of the Blue Sky Mountain Palace, overlooking the entire Blue Dragon City in the distance. His mother, Sarit Greatflower Whalen, stood beside him and said with a faint smile, "Anthony, don't have any conflicting emotions. This day was decided when your father was still alive. There is nothing bad about becoming a vassal of the Fire Kingdom. The Iron and Steel Ridge royal family will respect our choice." I don't care about the Iron and Steel Ridge royal family's attitude. Compared to the talented and bold List, Osborne has wasted more than 30 years and still hasn't ridden a platinum dragon. He's just a person with great ambition but little talent. Anthony shook his head. But great ambition but little talent is easy to communicate with. Great talent and bold strategy are dangerous. You want to talk about the Grey Iron Duchy? Yes, mother. A duchy that is older than our Sapphire Duchy disappeared just like that. I can't help but be vigilant. But this doesn't prove that List is dangerous. It only shows the greed of the Eagle royal family. Adonis is a short-sighted and incompetent person. List could have chosen not to treat the Sapphire Dragon, but he didn't do so. Adonis can't compare to this breadth of mind. Anthony nodded. Yes, a knight who can establish the foundation of a kingdom is a great knight. If you can think this way, the future of the Sapphire Duchy will be very smooth. How to handle the relationship with the Fire Kingdom will be the most important decision for our family in the future. Of course I can understand. Now, I'm very curious about the attitude of the 3 kingdoms towards the Fire Kingdom. Although this world is very vast, most of the resources have not been developed, and there are countless fertile lands hidden in the primeval forests. No one will give up their own interests. Anthony looked up at the sky and continued, List is nibbling away at the Eagle Kingdom. With every bite, the Fire Kingdom will grow a bit stronger. Maybe one day I can witness the birth of an empire? Chapter 1064. Platinum Tooth Palace. After Osborne Platinum met the emissary group from the Fire Kingdom, he summoned several high-ranking ministers of the kingdom to discuss. What kind of etiquette do you think our country should use to deal with the establishment of the Fire Kingdom? Your Majesty, our country has a good relationship with the Fire Kingdom. We should treat it with higher standards to stabilize the friendship between the two countries. After all, our two countries are discussing the partition of the Eagle Kingdom. Both sides should treat this matter with greater sincerity, said a minister. I don't think it's necessary to raise the standards. This will make List think he has the initiative. The two countries should divide the Eagle Kingdom, and our country should be the leader, not the young Fire Kingdom. Although the Fire Kingdom is young, List is not a mediocre person. I'm afraid we still need to rely on him in the battle of dragon slaying. It's not too much to give him a higher standard. Normal etiquette is enough. Maybe we can give some compensation in the marriage between the Rose and White family and the Fire family. The ministers expressed their opinions, but Osborne frowned. Let's not mention the marriage for the time being. Your Majesty, why? Everyone present was Osborne's confidant, so there was nothing to keep secret. He said faintly, maybe the Rose and White family is too confident, and there are some unpredictable changes in the marriage. Maybe List doesn't want the marriage. No. How is it possible? The steel pearl of the Rose and White family is the first beauty in the north. She is the most suitable marriage partner for the royal family in the Three Kingdoms. How can List be willing to give up such a good marriage if he wants to join the dragon-raising family? You think it's good, maybe the other party doesn't think it's good. Osborne squinted and said, if you have a siren magic shooter and a female dragon knight by your side, maybe you will consider what you should choose. This List is really enviable. Magic shooter and dragon knight were unattainable symbols, and now there were sirens and women as prefixes, which was even more noble and incredible. Osborne joked that it was enviable, but in fact he was really jealous to the point that he couldn't suppress it. The siren high mage and the female dragon knight also had a fatal attraction to him. Unfortunately, these noble women were all around List. If he was given a chance, he would immediately give up his current queen and choose one of them to be the new queen. Anyway, he already had a son, so the reproductive isolation between sirens and humans was no longer a problem. It was the same for the female dragon knight. However, he could only shout in his heart, why? Why is all the glory gathered in List's hands? Why am I, who was bathed in power and born of nobility, not the chosen son of glory? Why is it that the second son of a small noble from a remote countryside, a sapphire fly whose bloodline is less than 1/10,000th of mine, can become a king of a country on equal footing with me? Why isn't the fire dragon mine? The invisible dragon isn't mine? The mountain bronze dragon isn't mine? The bone dragon isn't mine? The unicorn isn't mine? Why isn't the siren high mage or the dragon knight mine? They shouted again and again. Unfortunately, when he returned to reality, he had to abandon these feelings. He had to be a qualified king who prioritized his own interests. You all have your own opinions, so I will make the final decision. This time, the celebration of the establishment of the Fire Kingdom will be prepared according to the standard of normal etiquette. At the same time, let the Red and White Rose family raise the standard. Osborne sent a letter, asking us to continue to increase our efforts to win over List. Mashu Marilyn, how many gifts do you think we should bring to the Fire Kingdom this time? Grand Duchess Rose sat at the head of the table and asked while cutting the delicate swan liver. Mashu put down her knife and fork and showed a handsome smile. The Red and White Rose family never lacks gifts, but since Uncle Osborne is reluctant to spend his own money, we will send gifts in the name of the Red and White Rose family. In short, we can't let Osborne take advantage of us. The Grand Duchess said unhappily, don't talk about these things between relatives. Mashu, you have to become more mature. Mashu responded gently, Mother, although the Red and White Rose family and the Platinum family are close, we are not servants. We still have to show some attitude. Otherwise, if List sees such a situation, I am afraid he will look down on our family, which is not good for my sister. What is List's attitude? Has the marriage not been put on the agenda? Grand Duchess Rose raised her head and looked at Mashu. Mashu pondered a little. There is too much preparation to be done for the establishment of a country. This time, I will make a formal marriage invitation to List. At this time Marilyn, who had been silent, suddenly said, Brother, I don't think you need to mention it. Oh, what? Maybe List doesn't have the idea of marriage. It's just our wishful thinking. Marilyn picked up a napkin and wiped the cream from the corner of her mouth. And I don't want my family to take the initiative to propose marriage. He needs to show sincerity, and now I don't see any sincerity. Marilyn, I am good friends with List. This is sincerity. Maybe that's just you being self-righteous. I'm self-righteous. Mashu said with a smile and confidence. Marilyn, my dear sister, when the people of the Red and White Rose family come up with wealth, there will be no self-righteousness. You have to know that family, love, and friendship can really be bought with money. Maybe all this is just an illusion brought by money. No, this is the magic of money. Mashu refuted her sister. Seeing that her sister did not speak, she said more confidently, Father, Mother, Uncle Osborne sent a letter, then we will take out the red dragon water that should have been sold to the White and White Rose family and give it to List. Grand Duchess Rose chewed slowly and ate a piece of foie gras. She nodded and said, if you want to do it well. When your sister becomes the queen of the Fire Kingdom, everything will return to the hands of the Red and White Rose family with interest. Remember, we have a lot of money, but we don't do unprofitable business. List did not pay attention to how the various countries arranged the emissary groups. He was now too busy. Even after several years of preparation, when they were really ready to establish a country, they found that the thousands of things were actually not ready. After the aristocratic enfeoffment, Flame Island would inevitably fall into the huge pressure of population shortage. How to arrange the labor vacuum after the departure of the aristocrats was the biggest trouble. This was definitely not the only trouble. Your Majesty, this is the Development Committee's enfeoffment arrangement for the Earls and above. You can see if there is anything that needs to be modified or added. Gort took a list and hurried to the Palace of Sun, Moon and Stars. List had officially moved into this magnificent palace, which stood on the top of the two mountains of the Sun and the Moon. The Development Committee had also moved from the Reed City administration to the Fire Kingdom administration, making this new big city the heart of Flame Island. Sit down first, let me have a look. List took the list and looked at it carefully. Chapter 1065. The list not only contained the information of every aristocrat, but also the detailed introduction of the kingdom's titles, the title regulations. List read it very carefully. The titles of the Fire Kingdom were officially named as 8 classes. The highest class was the king, the second class was the prince or grand duke, and the third class was the duke. These 3 classes belonged to the upper nobles. The king was inherited by the eldest son and was the only title. All the knight of the kingdom must follow the king unconditionally or conditionally and obey the king's orders. The prince and grand duke had the same title. The prince needed to have the royal bloodline, the Fire family's bloodline, and become a dragon knight. The grand duke had no bloodline restriction, but must ride a dragon that was not owned by the kingdom. In other words, the dragon knight trained by the royal family could not obtain the title of grand duke. In other words, without a dragon that completely belonged to one's own, one could not become a grand duke and establish a new country. The title of duke was a bit more complicated. There were 3 main sources. The first source was that if the son of the grand duke failed to ride a dragon, he would be demoted to the title of duke and continue to manage his own country. The second source was that the dragon knight trained by the royal family could obtain the title of duke after making military exploits. The third source was that the domain knight repeatedly made military exploits and could also be promoted to the title of duke. However, except for the son of the Grand Duke, as a dragon-raising family, any aptitude could inherit the title of duke. As for the other 2 types of duke titles, the son must become a domain knight in order to smoothly inherit it. In order to prevent the duke from accidentally dying and the son's young and insufficient training, it was relaxed for 1 generation. In other words, the son of the duke would still be a duke, but if he could not become a domain knight, the grandson could only be a marquis. On the list, there was no prince, no grand duke. There were only 3 candidates for the title of duke. Among them, Sapphire Duke Anthony Sapphire was just a name and was not included in the list of titles. There was no need for titles. Sapphire Duchy was an independent vassal state. The other 2. Lee William Tulip, Duke of Tulip Island, was the second largest island of the Fire Archipelago with an area of 450,000 square kilometers. Piero Grayiron, Duke of Parasol Island, was the 7th largest island of the Fire Archipelago with an area of 170,000 square kilometers. The Tulip family and the Grayiron family both had the domain knight manual. As long as the descendants weren't too useless, it wouldn't be difficult for them to become a domain knight, and they could inherit the title of Duke. Father, promote Marquis Blue Bushi to the Duke of Mermaid City. His fief will be Mermaid City. List thought for a moment and added. According to the nobility conferring regulations of the kingdom, the title of nobility in a city can only go up to the rank of Marquis. The title of Duke of Mermaid City doesn't comply with the regulations, Lee Williams said. The title of nobility regulations was the system of nobility that List had previously reviewed and approved. Although he was often fickle and did whatever he wanted, it was not good for him to slap himself in the face too often. Therefore, after pondering for a moment, he said, "Then Blue Bushi will be the Duke of the Mermaid Territory." But the Mermaid Territory belongs to the Blazing Island. Didn't you say that the Blazing Island will not bestow nobles other than the Burning Legion? Huh? List hesitated for a moment before saying, "The Mermaid Territory will be an exception and added to the title of nobility regulations. Anyway, it hasn't been officially published yet, so there's still room for amendments. From now on, the Mermaid Territory will be the sea around the Blazing Islands." After pausing for a moment, he continued, "Blue Bushi will be the Marquis of the Saltwater Sea. As for the Saltwater Sea, there's no need to ask where it is. She can choose Mermaid City as her fief." Therefore, after talking for a long time, he still rejected the previous title of nobility regulations. Lee William was probably used to his second son's way of doing things, so he didn't mind that he wanted to amend the title of nobility regulations. Instead he asked, "If Blue Bushi is made a duke, do you want to bestow the other 6 mermaid marquises as well?" "No need. Blue Bushi will stay in the Blazing Kingdom and manage Mermaid City seriously. The other 6 mermaids have already gone to travel around the world. How can they be bestowed the title of duke if they don't do their proper work? They're still living in the ancient times and must understand that they can only obtain status and resources if they integrate into the Blazing Kingdom." The mermaids traveled around the sea for almost a year. Although they had the task of surveying and mapping the coastline of the legendary continent, it was obvious that they were having too much fun outside and had only completed a little of the surveying and mapping of the coastline. List was very dissatisfied with this. He had already urged them a few times, but they weren't able to change their minds. Therefore, he was rather resentful and only bestowed the mermaid Blue Bushi. The 4th rank of the Blazing Kingdom was the Marquis, and the 5th rank was the Earl. These 2 ranks belonged to the middle nobles. Actually, List had originally planned to divide the dukes into high-class dukes and low-class dukes. High-class dukes were dukes with a country and were classified as upper nobles. Low-class dukes were dukes without a country and were classified as middle-class nobles. This way he would be able to gather 3 ranks of nobility, a total of 9 ranks of nobility. But in the end he didn't do this. Instead of dividing them into high-class and low-class dukes, it was better to create a new title. And he had another idea, to deliberately dilute the status of vassal states to reflect the authority of the king. After all, the king of a duchy was a duke. Most feudal lords also had dukes. This meant that vassal states were just slightly larger fiefs. Even if you were a dragon-rearing family, you were just a follower of the king. Therefore, in the end, the middle nobles were only Marquis and Earl. The inheritance of these 2 ranks required one to reach the level of a Sky Knight, which could be extended for 1 generation. But if a Sky Knight wasn't born after 1 generation, the rank had to be lowered. In the list, the 1st rank Marquis was Jade City's Marquis Emily Flame. As a light green sapphire dragon knight, List had asked Emily if she wanted to become a feudal noble. However, Emily decided to join the Burning Legion and hoped to follow List for life. Therefore, List gave her the surname Flame, and made the Jade City near the Dragon Lair Jade Mountain where Ethan lived her fief. The 2nd rank Marquis was P Island's Marquis, D. Maria Rainstone. Her fief was half of P Island. The P Island was the 8th largest island in the Fire Archipelago, with an area of 150,000 square kilometers. However, other than D. Maria, P Island had not been given to any other nobles. As the earliest Marquis to rely on, List had already promised D. Maria that once the Rainstone family had accumulated enough battle achievements, he would be promoted to the Duke of P Island. The entire P Island would become the Rainstone family's fief. The 3rd rank Marquis was Gemstone Left Territory's Marquis Geoffrey Furonqui. His fief was half of Gemstone Island, which was the Gemstone Left Territory. Gemstone Island was the 6th largest island in the Fire Archipelago, with an area of 220,000 square kilometers. It was divided into 2 territories, the Gemstone Left Territory and the Gemstone Right Territory. Geoffrey was a perfect Sky Knight. He had been captured as a earl in the Eagle Kingdom and performed well after surrendering. The fourth-rank marquis was Adamantine City's Marquis Yevich Waterpeanut. His fief was the Fire Kingdom's gateway to the legendary continent, Adamantine City. Surprisingly, Yevich did not choose to become a feudal noble. Instead, he chose to join the Burning Legion and become a feudal noble. He was still pretending to be a great noble of the Eagle Kingdom and promoting internal strife in the Blizzard Mountain Duchy. The fifth-rank marquis was Fire City's Marquis Paris Flame. Her fief was the Fire City. Like Emily the light magic great swordsman, Paris had become List's lover. She chose to become a feudal noble and was given the surname Flame by List. The sixth-rank marquis was Gem Right Territory's Marquis, Dult Red Apricot. He was one of the nobles who had been captured by the Eagle Kingdom first to develop the Fire Island. At first he was an earl. In recent years, he had made many contributions and was conferred the title of Marquis. The seventh-rank marquis was Thorn Upper Territory's Marquis Mendez Cabbage. His fief was 1/3 of Jingji Island, which was the Thorn Upper Territory. Mendez was a former Grey Iron Duchy's marquis, and he was a perfect Sky Knight. However, he did not perform well after joining the Fire Kingdom. Jingji Island was the fourth largest island in the Fire Archipelago. It covered an area of 270,000 square kilometers and was divided into 3 territories, namely Thorn Upper Territory, Thorn Left Territory, and Thorn Right Territory. The eighth-rank marquis was Dragon Valley City's Marquis Nicole Bellows. His fief was the Dragon Valley City next to the Dragon Pit Giant Mine. The Bellows family was an Iron Knight family. In order to help List build the country, the Sapphire Grand Duke transferred the Bellows family to List. They had worked hard all these years and deserved the title of Marquis. The ninth-rank marquis was Thorn Left Territory's Marquis, Amat Ice Shield. He was Yevich's father-in-law and a Marquis of Snow Wind Duchy who had secretly sided with List. For the time being, Amat was still a Marquis of Snow Wind Duchy and cooperated with Yevich to provoke the Elder Prince and the Second Prince. The 10th to 15th rank marquis were all mermaids. Etnia, the Marquis of Great West, the Marquis of Fishermen, Gulvig, the Marquis of Water, Tibidas, the Marquis of the Trench, Sharawala, the Fugitive Marquis Viswendi, the Lost Marquis Kokorich. Chapter 1066. The 16th rank marquis was the Right Marquis of Thorns Forest, Elton Golden Chrysanthemum. List did not like this follower with poor aptitude and character. He had recruited him for the sake of buying a horse's bones. Thus, Elton was previously a marquis, but he was still a low-ranking marquis. The 17th rank marquis was the Marquis of Reed City, Mary Dawn Daybreak. As the leader of the Blood Servants and a pure-blood vampire, Mary had always been deeply trusted by List. She was his eyes in the dark, spying on the intelligence of various countries. The Blood Servants' cultivation system had been improved by a Chi and the Association of Mages, abandoning some of the contents of the magic system and moving closer to the Knight system. Their fighting strength was further weakened, but their lurking ability was greatly improved. Thus, they were formally incorporated into the Burning Corps by List and established the Blood Orders of Chivalry. Therefore, all the vampires were nobles of the city. The 18th rank marquis was the Upper Kelp Marquis Winston Fluorescent Grass. His fief was a quarter of the Kelp Island, which was also the Upper Kelp domain. He was one of the marquis who had migrated from the Grey Iron Duchy. After joining the Fire Kingdom, his performance was average. The Kelp Island was the third largest island of the Fire Kingdom, covering an area of 280,000 square kilometers. It was divided into 4 domains: Upper Kelp Domain, Lower Kelp Domain, Left Kelp Domain and Right Kelp Domain. The 19th rank marquis was the Lower Kelp Domain Marquis Johnson Fujimoon. He was also a marquis who had migrated from the Grey Iron Duchy, and his performance was also average. The 20th rank marquis was the Left Kelp Domain Marquis Hilton Basil. His son had married List's sister Ulvera. Thus, he had migrated from the Sapphire Duchy to the Fire Kingdom very early on. Relying on his kinship and outstanding military exploits, he had become the last of the 20 founding marquis of the Fire Kingdom. After looking at the list of marquis, List basically approved of this arrangement. But after thinking about it, he quickly added, "Father, 20 founding marquis is too few. Add another one to make a total of 21. Let Sassamit Saint join us. I will confer him the title of Marquis of the Right Kelp Domain. This is my special reward for him." Sassamit Saint was Listener Sioux of the Killing Moon Holy Tribe. List descended from the sky on his dragon, killed the old listener, and supported him to take the throne. He showed his excellent character as a trader of the Moonslayers. He was loyal to List to incorporate the native tribes of the Moonslayers, even resorting to all kinds of violent and bloody methods. When List asked the ancient sorcerers to join the Knight system, he immediately changed his surname to Saint, which meant that he was a follower of a saint. In other words, he was a follower of List. Such a lackey naturally deserved to be rewarded. Lee William frowned. List Sassamit is a life count. As a noble who is not a knight, according to the title of nobility regulations, he can only be given a life title, and not a hereditary title. Moreover, life nobles can only be conferred up to the rank of Earl. I know, father, but I want to make an exception for Sassamit. List wasn't ashamed of being indecisive. On the contrary, he said with a hint of pride, I hope to use this method to remind the nobles of the kingdom that the Fire Kingdom is different from the other three kingdoms. Here, my authority is above any system. He glanced at List. Lee William replied, I'm afraid that this will make most of the nobles dislike you, which will damage your authority. After all, the knight system has existed for thousands of years. List smiled faintly. Father, you don't have to worry. My lifespan has already exceeded the limit of a normal person. I am destined to rule the Fire Kingdom for a long time. Slowly, the nobles will get used to it, and learn to use the new knight system I created to measure their lives. You found the training method of the Dragon City Lord? Lee William couldn't help but think. Not the Dragon City Lord, but close. List didn't want to say more, so Lee William didn't ask any more. Even though they were father and son, they belonged to different families. Some secrets shouldn't be touched. He changed the topic and said, Since you have your considerations, I don't object to making Sassamit a marquis. I hope this move won't affect the boundaries between the nobles of feudal lands, feudal cities, and life nobles. Other than the 8 levels of nobility, there were 3 different types of nobility in the kingdom. The first type was a feudal title, in which the nobles had their own territory and enjoyed absolute control over it. They could also recruit their own followers and infect them. The second type was a feudal title, in which the nobles had a city as their territory. The nobles had jurisdiction over the city, and they were under the jurisdiction of the Burning Legion. These 2 types of nobility were hereditary, and it was clear that the eldest son would inherit it. The third type was a life nobility. Life nobility did not have a territory and it couldn't be hereditary. After death, the nobility would be taken back by the kingdom. Other than honorary life nobility, feudal lands, feudal cities, and nobility all had corresponding knight-level restrictions. A trainee knight could be made a lord at most. An earth knight could be made a baron at most. An elite earth knight could be made a viscount at most. A sky knight could be made a marquis at most. A domain knight could be made a duke at most. Furthermore, the Fire Kingdom changed the lowest level of nobility, Lord Knight, to Lord. Therefore the 8 levels of nobility were King, Prince/Grand Duke, Duke, Marquis, Earl, Viscount, Baron, and Lord. There were a total of 64 earls on the list. There were actually even more earls and nobles. However, these nobles, because of their original affiliation after consulting their opinions, continued to follow a few feudal dukes and marquis. For example, Deborah Rainflower continued to follow his uncle D. Maria. The number 1 of List's direct earl followers was Stormwind City's Earl Marcus Wheel. His former home tutor ultimately chose to join the Burning Legion, and became the leader of the Burning Orders of Chivalry. His strength was only an elite Earth Knight, and he was promoted to Earl by List. Stormwind City was located in the Royal Territory, and was a satellite of the Fire Kingdom. Number 2 was Longtail Island's Earl Roland Pine Cone. He was List's uncle, and was also an elite Earth Knight, promoted to Earl by special permission. Number 3 was Spirit City's Earl Gort Mast. This former home tutor did not want to join the Burning Legion. Of course, even if he wanted to join List, he would not be willing. No matter how high his title was, it could not hide that he was only a trainee knight. Many people secretly criticized his title behind his back. As for Spirit City, it was located not far from Realgar City, and belonged to the original Realgar territory. The administrative division of the Fire Kingdom was divided into 5 levels: territory, city, county, town, and village. It was basically a copy of China's provinces, cities, counties, towns, and villages. Cities were also divided into territory, city, and county cities according to their administrative divisions. Territory or territory cities were used to confer marquises, city or city cities were used to confer earls, and county cities were used to confer viscounts. At the level of town, there was no distinction between city or fief, and the title of earl was used to confer earl. Below that, there was only the title of Earl and fief, no title. Marcus's territory, Stormwind City, was a cities, and Gort's territory, Spirit City, was a separate city. In addition, according to the size of the island, some islands automatically replaced territory, city, and county as the title of Earl. Roland's territory, Longtail Island, was an island the size of a city in the Shell Sea. In the Flame Archipelago, apart from the 5th largest island, Red Tree Island, and the 9th largest island, Anchor Island, which have yet to be conferred, the other large and small islands have already been conferred. In the future, when there are new aristocratic enfeoffments, we can only enfeoff to the open sea and the mainland. Lee Williams sighed with emotion. When he first found the Flame Archipelago, he thought that it was incomparably vast, even larger than the Sapphire Duchy. It was enough to establish a duchy here. However, List directly established a kingdom, and the Flame Archipelago seemed too shabby. Thus, the first batch of aristocratic enfeoffments were basically all over the archipelago. Therefore, with Realgar City as the gateway, we will continue to expand to the mainland. Nibbling away at the Eagle Kingdom is the best choice. List put down the list. He did not look at the list of 3 ranks of aristocratic enfeoffments: Viscount, Baron, and Lordship. Just by looking at the number of aristocratic enfeoffments, he found that there were about 366 Viscounts, 1,240 Barons, and over 10,000 Lords. Counting 3 Dukes, 21 Marquises, and 64 Earls, this was the entire aristocratic population of the Fire Kingdom. They all had the same honor, the founding aristocratic population. Father, we will hold the founding ceremony according to this list. List stood up and walked out of the palace side by side with Lee William. In addition, the fiefs can be adjusted appropriately. Young, powerful but low-ranking aristocrats should be enfeoffed to the mainland as much as possible, so that they can continue to forge ahead and expand their territory. After the chaos of the founding period, a new war will soon be launched. The war he was talking about was no longer a small-scale war like the order to expand. Instead, it was a formal declaration of war against the Eagle Kingdom in alliance with the Steel Ridge Kingdom. It feels too rushed. List, perhaps we should slow down. You're tuning in to the Han Lee's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.